He had great confidence in the first sword recorded in the Starry Sky Chronicles. No matter how formidable Broly was, as long as this sword emerged, it would annihilate everything, turning this void into a portrayal of the starry sky. Space and time would be compressed into a painting. This sword was his greatest reliance. "Are you ready?" Jian Wushuang held the sword with one hand, slowly closing his eyes, sensing the power coming from the starry sky. The battle between the two was about to come to an end. In the chaotic region far away from the Western Sea, Maluo and others stood here, but the direction of the Western Sea was now a scorched earth, turning into a battlefield ruin. The powerful figures of the Earth Realm Divine Temple's headquarters had long sensed the intense aura of the battle, but no one came to watch or intervene. Bai Yi's avatar sat on the throne, still holding a token in his hand. When Jian Wushuang and Broly had just started their confrontation, he received the message. Before he could go, Jinling personally intercepted him. At this moment, a subtle scene unfolded before their eyes. Bai Yi sat on the throne, while Jinling, like an aged old man, stood at the entrance of the hall, gazing into the distance. "Lord Jinling, are you really giving up on Broly?" Bai Yi still felt somewhat reluctant, and there was a hint of unwillingness in his tone. After all, he was a formidable practitioner of the transformation Tao, and now he had grown to this extent. Jinling didn't respond. He merely shook his head, which in itself conveyed an attitude. Evidently, Bai Yi was unaware of the true situation. The reality of Mieshang, perhaps even the four great temple masters were unaware of it. "So, it's you who wants to destroy the Qixin temple," Jinling muttered to himself. Initially, he had speculated and repeatedly examined the timeline, but he couldn't identify the person responsible. He had initially thought it was Jian Wushuang, then doubted it, and when he took action against Hu Qing, he discovered the clues, starting with Zhang Shang. Ultimately, it attracted Mieshang, and only then did he understand everything. It wasn't someone else intending to destroy the Qixin temple. It was Mieshang himself who wanted to destroy it. Since he had set this calamity in motion initially, why create the Qixin temple and bring him into existence? He too was just a pawn. You shouldn't have trusted him. Jinling gritted his teeth, inwardly screaming. He had limited information about Mieshang, but he could still discern that the opponent was far from ordinary. Initially, he was the second strongest in the Moro Temporal River, a half-step 7 Tribulations realm powerhouse. The Moro Temporal River was a moderately sized temporal river, and having a 7 Tribulations realm powerhouse appearing in numerous eras was already remarkable. The emergence of the Qixin had led many to believe that the Moro Temporal River would expand and become a dazzling temporal river in the starry sky. In the end, everything collapsed. Behind all of this, there was likely the scheming of Mieshang. Although it's unclear what promises Mieshang made to Qixin in the beginning, it is evident now that Qixin had placed trust in him. Moreover, the individuals taken away by Mieshang were quite delicate. Among the 3 great true monarchs that evolved from the Tao of devouring abandoned by Qixin, 2 were still alive, or, from another perspective, they were all still alive. Shan Jun, Gu Jun, and Mo Jun. Initially, the true form of Shan Jun was disintegrated, giving rise not only to Shan Jun but also to the 4 demon lords. Jinling knew about 2 of them, both taken away by Mieshang. And there was Jiang Shang, the extraordinary cultivator who appeared in the Qixin temple. From the moment Jiang Shang appeared, he had been cautious. She did not show up earlier or later, but chose this particular moment. Since Jiang Shang was involved in the chessboard, Broly was very likely to be associated with Mieshang. In the 4 great secret realms, it was impossible to produce experts at the realm of tribulation. The practitioners in the secret realms all had their flaws, and this was an unchangeable fact. Unless Mieshang intervened to modify their origin sources, Jiang Shang and Broly had not been modified by him. This was clearly a move made by Mieshang. Even if Jian Wushuang didn't take action, Mieshang would personally eliminate Broly. But now that Jian Wushuang had taken action, it could reduce some unnecessary gossip. In the past, he didn't care about such things. But times had changed. Mieshang's appearance was both righteous and wicked. It not only posed a threat to the current Qixin temple but probably also to his position. In case something unexpected happened, and he got kicked out, what would he do? At that time, things might become difficult to explain. Fortunately, he had foresight and established the Elder Palace, firmly holding the inheritors in his grasp. In the present 4 great temples, he no longer believed in them. Mieshang collaborated with Qixin back then. If Bai Yi and the others were to learn about this, rebellion might be inevitable, and they might turn to Mieshang. Now he had to wait for Mieshang to make a move. The fear was that after the other party left, there would be no movement, and he would be at a disadvantage. If something unexpected happened, he could always escape. Leading the Qixin temple to other temporal rivers, also known as rivers of time and space, Zhenling repeatedly investigated the 4 great secret realms and the entire interior of the Qixin temple. Zhenling was never at ease. On the battlefield of the Western Sea, a peak showdown was about to unfold. Jian Wushuang faced off against Broly. Now, Jian Wushuang had once again reached the peak state, his strength comparable to that of a supreme peak expert. The sword in his hand could easily slay a supreme peak opponent. Broly had also reached his perfect form, fully unleashing all the potential within him, and his transformation reached its peak. His combat power had even reached the terrifying peak of the supreme peak, comparable to ancient practitioners like Wuxia who had cultivated for countless years. Swish! Jian Wushuang's figure began to flicker, his speed surpassing imagination. Although his figure seemed to be stationary, his aura had already reached the deepest part of the void. Starry Sky Chronicles. Jian Wushuang roared angrily. The Juyun sword was held horizontally in front of him, and in the next moment, he directly plunged towards Broly. The first sword move. The sword chi was vast and majestic, suddenly slanting. Countless thoughts trembled. Space changed. Time froze. Broly clenched his fists, placed them at his waist, and with a sudden tap of his toe, he directly shattered the condensed space beneath his feet. He advanced towards Jian Wushuang, unrelenting. In his hands, numerous waves of energy continuously surged towards Jian Wushuang. However, the power condensed from these auras was slowed down, too sluggish for Jian Wushuang. Numerous large circular energies were frozen in the void, like suspended suns and moons. At the tip of the Juyun sword, a burst of starry sky intent erupted, and the space began to distort amidst the tremors. Time came to a complete standstill, freezing Broly's body in place. His understanding of time was limited. He could only grasp certain mysteries through the starry sky first sword. All he could do was immobilize Broly in the void. Freezing his consciousness remained beyond his reach. Thus, Broly could sense his own slowing speed, yet his consciousness and thoughts continued to race. After being frozen, he once again erupted with a powerful aura, attempting to shatter the confinement. His physical body was frozen, but his consciousness persisted. Breaking free from his physical form, his divine body, accompanied by the origin source, shot out together. This scene startled Jian Wushuang. In the frozen void, 2 versions of Broly appeared. One was a dimmed physical body, already abandoned by Broly. He had made a decisive choice. If he didn't abandon it, facing this sword strike would mean certain death. However, even now, without a physical body, it was impossible to stop him relying solely on the divine body. Slash! Jian Wushuang once again exerted all his strength, changing direction and charging towards Broly's divine body. The towering divine body was not bound by the constraints of time. Broly also understood that without the support of a physical body, he was currently very fragile and needed to break the restrictions of this place as soon as possible. Although only the divine body remained, the power of each punch still possessed the supreme peak strength. With each punch, the void continued to shatter. In front of Broly, the frozen void seemed like a series of mirrors. Jian Wushuang's eye sockets contracted. At this rate, he couldn't attack Broly at all. Moreover, the strength consumed by this sword move was too great, and he couldn't afford to drag on with his opponent. Broly, can you only hide? Jian Wushuang, in desperation, could only try to provoke the other verbally, angrily shouting, "You're not worthy of being a cultivator, nor a qualified warrior. Have you forgotten Bukuin's teachings? Show me your full strength and face me in a direct battle." In a head-on confrontation, he was invincible. This sword strike was invincible. Broly's eyes turned from white to blood-red, and the white arcs on his body turned blood-colored. His aura surged once again. This aura made Jian Wushuang feel somewhat familiar and fearful. He had considerable knowledge of Tribulation Realm experts and had faced several Sixth Tribulation Realm superpowers such as Fuego. That aura, he was too familiar with it. Broly could still erupt, which he hadn't anticipated. This time, the aura could rival that of a Tribulation Realm. The sword was drawn, and he couldn't care less. Even if Qixin bowed to Broly at this moment, he would charge forward and cut him down. This was the only chance. Whenever there was only one chance left, he would always ask himself deep down, if this were his last opportunity in life, how would he unleash strength beyond himself to defeat the opponent? If he couldn't succeed, it would be his downfall. So he had to win. The Juyun sword froze the void and time. Now, in this void, only he and Broly's divine body could move. Broly transformed again after entering another realm. Gone was the previous ferocity, replaced by a hint of composure. Facing his strongest strike, Broly didn't dodge but confronted it head-on. This played right into his hands. The Juyun sword instantly descended, transforming into a size of billions of miles, facing Broly directly. There was no chance for him to dodge now. Jian Wushuang seemed to have seen what Broly would look like after his fall through time. However, at this moment, in the headquarters of the Earth Realm Divine Temple, Zhenling suddenly sensed something amiss. Shouting in alarm, he hurriedly rushed towards Jian Wushuang's direction. Zhenling freely traversed the 4 great secret realms, needing only a breath to reach Jian Wushuang's location. But for peak-level experts, even a breath was somewhat slow. The first strike. Success. Jian Wushuang was overjoyed. This time, with a complete execution, he gained profound insights. The first strike could be considered truly perfected to a state of perfection. The space within 1,000,000 miles in all directions transformed into a painting, leaving only him as a vibrant life. Broly's presence could no longer be sensed. In the painting, Broly, with his red hair and shimmering red arcs, extended one hand, pinching Jian Wushuang's Juyun sword with 2 fingers. How arrogant! Jian Wushuang looked at the scene, disdainful in his heart. Attempting to block him with just 2 fingers? That was underestimating the power of the starry sky too much. Lowering his head to admire his masterpiece, Jian Wushuang felt satisfied. However, his Juyun sword also fell into the painting this time, turning into an inanimate object. But it wasn't a big deal. He could retrieve it using the power of life. It wasn't difficult. Just as he was about to separate the painting and prepare to take it, the space captured in the painting began to tremble. Ha! Jian Wushuang scanned the surroundings in surprise. The next moment, his chest burst open, and a giant hand appeared before him. Before he could react, trying to mobilize the power of life to replenish himself, death had already arrived, firmly suppressing his life force within the origin source. That frenzied power of death continued to devour his life power. Jian Wushuang stared wide-eyed with his mouth agape. Life was constantly slipping away. It was Broly, or rather, it was Mieshang. Mieshang controlled Broly, suddenly shattering his starry sky chronicles, seizing the opportunity to launch a sneak attack and piercing through his chest in one strike. The candle dragon armor shattered completely, turning into fragments. Without the intact Beast God origin source, the Beast God weapon could easily be shattered by a Tribulation Realm expert. Resisting the Supreme Peak was easy, but he was facing Mieshang, a super being capable of directly confronting Zhenling. He found himself unable to communicate with Zhenling. This time, it was his turn to be completely desperate. The force of death, in a relentless manner, devoured his life. In a trance, he also came to understand. No wonder he had evolved from the power of all things into the power of life. There was indeed a relative strength. Now he had become someone else's stepping stone. Space combined with time could form a temporal structure. Life combined with death could also form reincarnation. This wasn't a simple cycle. Like Hu Qing mastering the essence of Zen, what he practiced was true reincarnation. Now, he had taken a step to comprehend the true essence of reincarnation. It was a complete cycle, on par with the level of time and space. It was a power surpassing the realm of tribulation. A shortcut, a path to step into a higher level. At this moment, Jian Wushuang realized it. However, he found that the force of death, although it could suppress him, did not contain a power as formidable as Miesheng's true form. It was relative and interaction. If the death power of the sixth tribulation realm eroded the power of life, it would probably be like drawing water with a bamboo basket, futile. The opponent was just a mass of death power at the supreme peak level. He still had hope. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang summoned the last strand of thought power and traveled to his own origin source C, condensing it into an incarnation. At this moment, his origin source C was churning with waves. When his incarnation appeared, it coincidentally faced the mass of death power. The incarnation formed by the condensation of life force had the same appearance as his main body, but emitted a green aura. Upon discovering Jian Wushuang's incarnation, the death power twisted and transformed into a figure resembling Jian Wushuang, only in black. Hee hee, you can't stop me, the black Jian Wushuang sneered. Jian Wushuang directly made a move. This place was his origin source C. Could he be threatened by an outsider? Just with your scraps, you still dare to attempt devouring me? Jian Wushuang shouted angrily and directly attacked. The two engaged in a simple battle, using their pure strength, without resorting to the desperate and secret techniques used by the main bodies. The purest death and the purest life. This time, Jian Wushuang grew stronger as he fought, fueled by the fear of death and the desire for life. The power of death was different. Have you heard that it's better to be alive than to die a good death? Jian Wushuang attacked with words even in his leisure. Though death is frightening and brings fear, the resilience of the power of life cannot be fully realized until facing death. Now, facing death head-on, the power of life erupted completely. Get out of here! Jian Wushuang smashed the force of death with a punch, then swiftly appeared behind the opponent. Another knee strike shattered the condensed silhouette of the death power completely. With a satisfied breath, Jian Wushuang turned around and found that the black aura had instantly transformed into his own likeness. Everyone eventually dies, and some people need a little help. This was his retort. Jian Wushuang raised an eyebrow and sneered, I don't need your help because my helper has already arrived. Outside, the powerful aura of Zhenling suddenly descended. Miesheng, you've crossed the line. An invisible giant hand directly reached through Jian Wushuang, pulling the power of death out of his body. Inside the origin source sea, Jian Wushuang breathed a sigh of relief. As the power of death was pulled away, a small black snake fell into the sea, unnoticed. Jian Wushuang's avatar directly reciprocated, and the injuries on his body completely healed. However, the candle dragon inner armor was gone, reduced to some fragments. It was uncertain whether it could be repaired. Having just unleashed the Starry Sky Chronicles, he was now at his weakest. Although he had no injuries, he couldn't mobilize the power of the Starry Sky, unable to reach his strongest state. Currently, he could only muster the combat power of a Tier 5 Emperor. Without the power of the Starry Sky, this might be his limit. He could only rely on the divine body to contend with a Tier 6 Emperor. Nie Yuan truly gave him a valuable treasure. Zhenling glanced at Jian Wushuang and completely shattered the power of death in his hand. Take this person and leave quickly. Zhenling had never been this angry. Due to Miesheng, the disturbance within the Qishan temple had become severe. Moreover, the power within Jian Wushuang's body was contrary to Miesheng's, perhaps part of a deliberate plan. Miesheng's true form had not completely descended. Instead, the power of death power left within Broly's body was causing mischief. Whoosh! A dark figure emerged from Broly's origin source. It was Miesheng. You've discovered all of this. Miesheng revealed a hint of a smile, then waved his hand. covering Broly with a black halo. Broly's divine body and flesh recombined, but he had now fallen into a deep slumber. Zhenling stood in front of Jian Wushuang, silently observing without uttering a word. However, Jian Wushuang felt somewhat unwilling and spoke. "My lord, we can't let them go. Instead, it would be better to eliminate Broly and the pseudo-body of Mieshang. Letting them go like this would be a pity. Little guy, Broly alone scared you off." Mieshang cast an unfriendly glance. The transformation of Broly indeed startled Jian Wushuang. Xianxia was already formidable enough. They couldn't afford to let another major enemy escape. Zhenling shook his head and said, "Before I change my mind, leave quickly." It wasn't that Zhenling was merciful, but he couldn't act first. A strong will deep within him suppressed him, the fragment of memory, a massive shard from the original Qixin. Without integrating that shard, it could already interfere with his consciousness. If it were to merge, the Qixin temple might already be under Mieshang's control. Mieshang also saw the conflict within Zhenling and reminded, "You are the true spirit of Qixin temple, and more importantly, a part of Qixin. Don't forget that." This was a flaw that emerged in his and Qixin's initial planning. Unexpectedly, with the appearance of Zhenling, an independent consciousness emerged. Otherwise, the plan would have been even smoother than it is now. It was precisely because of this independent consciousness that Zhenling came to genuinely detest the path of devouring and abhor Jian Wushuang. With Mieshang carrying Broly, they swiftly left through the opened passage by Zhenling. The passage eventually closed up again. Mieshang, now outside the Qixin temple, appeared at the pinnacle of a universe. Beneath his feet lay a circular universe, and standing on a colossal celestial body, Mieshang's avatar cursed in anger. Because this place was not the original universe, not even within the same space-time continuum as the Qixin temple. Just as they appeared, a group of strange armored foreign warriors approached in their direction. This space-time was far more formidable than the one where the original universe existed, even several times more powerful than the Moro space-time in the past. "Wait, fellow Taoist." Mieshang's avatar and his follower instantly elevated their strength to the tribulation realm, intending to have a proper conversation with this group of strong individuals. The leader, a poisonous scorpion woman in purple armor, swayed her tail. She belonged to the Scorpion clan. Upon realizing Mieshang's tribulation realm cultivation, there was no trace of fear. Instead, there was a hint of amusement. At the tribulation realm, daring to intrude into my Scorpion clan's nest universe. You have quite the audacity. These patrolling powerhouses were all emperors. However, this didn't mean there were no tribulation realm powerhouses presiding in this place. When Mieshang was just discovered, a formidable figure, surpassing the 5 tribulation realm, began to descend. A colossal illusion shrouded the crowd. Subordinates pay respects to the general. After seeing off Mieshang, Zhenling's expression relaxed a bit. The recent disturbance wasn't solely due to the interference of the memory fragments in his body. Instead, it was the backlash brought by him opening a passage to other dimensions. This was also an experiment, a chance to test his skills against both Broly and Mieshang. Maintaining the connection for the two individuals shouldn't pose any problem. However, it wasn't enough. Sending away Qixin Temple together with them was utterly impossible. Yet, he could send away a few trustworthy inheritors from within the Qixin Temple. That was still achievable. For example, the current Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang, have you ever thought about leaving this place? Jian Wushuang was startled by Zhenling's sudden words, fearing that Zhenling no longer wanted him. In haste, he bowed, expressing his loyalty. Enough, I didn't mean that. You've seen that Mieshang came for you, and Qixin Temple is no longer important. Zhenling revealed the truth. Jian Wushuang could sense it. After all, it was the great Tao of reincarnation, a Tao comparable to the dimension of time and space. If Mieshang succeeded, Qixin Temple would indeed lose its significance. At that time, no one knew what level of power Mieshang would attain. After taking a breath, Jian Wushuang respectfully said, "It's entirely up to you, my lord. After you have completed the Tao merge, I will grant you an opportunity. and then you will leave Qixin Temple for a while, Zhenling said slowly with hands behind his back. Currently, Jian Wushuang's strength, though having the ability to protect himself in other dimensions, was still too weak. At least, he needed to leave after successfully merging with the Tao. Jian Wushuang understood in his heart. After merging with the Tao, even though the Zhenling calculated to keep him inside, he still wanted to go out and explore. Now, it seemed to align with his intentions. With a plan in mind, Jian Wushuang was puzzled once again. My lord, if I go out, won't I run into Mieshang? Mieshang was currently in the original universe. Even if he were to enter the temporal river, he might not escape the grasp of Mieshang, unless he left this temporal river. I will send you to other temporal rivers, ones that are relatively powerful. There, you won't need to worry about anything. Strive to join some powerful forces. The stronger, the better. With your talent, there shouldn't be a problem. Consider it an exploration for the Qixin Temple. Having understood Mieshang's layout, Zhenling dared not plunder trial practitioners from the outside world anymore. In case he cultivated a few more pawns, he would end up losing both the wife and the soldiers. Jian Wushuang nodded upon hearing this. There was no problem with that. Heading to a stronger timeline might bring good luck. Perhaps he could even reach the timeline of teacher Xianxia. Work hard. The help Qixin Temple can provide is not much anymore. In the future, you'll need to rely on your own efforts. After encouraging Jian Wushuang with a few words, Zhenling left. He left Jian Wushuang alone. The last sentence from Zhenling was quite modest. The treasures of the Qixin Temple were surely more than just this. He had only obtained the origin source of all things. Swish! Maluo, realizing the silence, rushed over immediately. Seeing Jian Wushuang alive, he breathed a sigh of relief. Young master! Maluo respectfully stood by the side. Jian Wushuang waved his hand and instructed. Prepare the flying artifact, go to the nearest teleportation array, and return to the heavenly realm. The earth realm was satisfactory. There probably wasn't much worth lingering over in the future. Returning to the heavenly realm early for Tao merge was the key. With the origin source, he could elevate the power of life to new heights, and even break through the black hole realm in one go. The two of them made a high-profile entrance into the Earth realm, only to leave quietly in the end. The outside world also left a seed for Jian Wushuang. A mighty temporal river, the vast starry sky, concealing too many secrets. He needed to explore each one, find teacher Xianxia, and unravel the unsolved mysteries. Before embarking on a new journey, he needed many preparations. Back in the heavenly realm, without any hesitation, he headed straight for the Elder Palace. The last time he left the Elder Palace, he was driven away by Wuxia, but this time Wuxia and the three palace masters personally welcomed him. And because of his recent relationship with Wuxia stood at the forefront. Although only a few days had passed since they last met, the other party acted as if they hadn't seen each other for many years, excitedly welcoming Jian Wushuang's return. The three palace masters even lowered their posture to the utmost. Even Chong Feng Sword God had a smile on his face. Remember, Jian Wushuang had killed his younger brother. Forgot about it in just a few days? But thinking about it, since the plan of that time had been fully revealed, Chong Feng Sword God would hate Wuxia if he hated anyone. He wouldn't hold any grudge against Jian Wushuang, and he didn't believe Jian Wushuang could kill Tai San. Probably it was Wuxia making a move in secret. Now, he found himself in an unusually passive position. Among the three palace masters, Qingyo remained as neutral as always. If others gained, he didn't lose, and if others lost, he still didn't lose. Forever standing in a neutral position. Palace Master Lu Hua's bet paid off this time, and he was the most pleased. The first day of his return was inevitably filled with socializing. In the Elder Palace, some familiar faces came to congratulate. Qiuhuang, the old man with sheep horns, and those ancient Tier 5 emperors of the original universe were among them. But now, they were no longer as simple as Tier 5 emperors. Following Wanyan, Dongshang, and several other Tier 5 emperors, they also entered the three bridges guarded by Divine General Mayin and reaped substantial rewards. Many of them advanced to become Tier 6 emperors. Wan Yen and Dongsheng, who were the first to enter, had already advanced to Tier 6 emperors early on. However, each of these individuals admired Jian Wushuang, a Tao lord who could kill Tai San. As for the battles between the human realm and the earth realm, they had long been sealed off, and they were completely unaware of them. They were still at the level of Jian Wushuang slaying Tier 6 emperors. If they knew that Jian Wushuang could now even kill Supreme Peak, they would be astonished. Everyone, I feel a bit sorry for you. The origin source of all things in the Beiwang Tower, Jian Wushuang, for once, did not feign ignorance and brought up this matter. The Beiwang Tower was originally a sacred place for all cultivators, but now it had to be stopped. After hearing this, Dongsheng was the first to stand up and said, Wushuang, don't say that. The strong are respected, and this is what you deserve. Moreover, you personally took risks and completely eradicated the headquarters of that shadow sect. With such great merits and your strength, all of this is rightfully yours. There's nothing to apologize for. Dongsheng is right. Wushuang, we support you. Wan Yen also chimed in. Other elders who had a good relationship with Jian Wushuang also spoke up. In fact, he didn't need to devour all of the origin source of all things. Half would be enough. However, the remaining half would be useless. The Beiwang Tower had to be stopped. Seeing these people being so sincere, Jian Wushuang waved his hand and said, Everyone, I am willing to take out 1/3 of the origin source of all things as a reward for you all. Since he was already playing along, he might as well be generous for once. He ate meat and also let these people have some soup. Upon hearing this, the crowd naturally didn't show any pretense and were delighted one after another. 1/3 of the origin source of all things was quite substantial. Distributed among everyone, it was even more than what they would gain from conquering a dozen levels of the Beiwang Tower. Jian Wushuang stood up directly and said, Let's distribute it now. This time he was so selfless, but there were also some personal motives in his heart. After the Tao merge, he was about to leave. To leave the universe that nurtured him, to leave the Qixin Temple. In the current outside world, apart from the suppressed true monarch, there was also Mieshang. He didn't know if the original universe could survive. According to his speculation, the passage to the Great Yen Domain was in the Great Sea region. If Mieshang followed the passage into the Divine Power universe, his hometown world would probably be in trouble. Even if Mieshang didn't bother to do that, once the true monarch broke free from the suppression, he would likely devour the original universe recklessly, and then everything would be finished. In the future, it would rely on these people to protect the original universe. Now, giving them some benefits to reward them was no big deal. Speaking of the matter at hand, Jian Wushuang led the crowd directly to the Beiwang Tower. There won't be many opportunities like this in the future. If any of you still lack confidence in breaking through, you can try it now. Jian Wushuang wasn't in a hurry. A few more years wouldn't make much difference. Upon hearing this, some of the people were itching to try and entered the Beiwang Tower one after another. Even for those without attempts left, Jian Wushuang generously granted them chances to challenge, allowing them to enter freely. Since the origin source of all things belonged to him, the 3 palace masters naturally had no objections. The elder who guarded this place looked at the spirited Jian Wushuang and sighed inwardly. Once an ordinary trial participant, as commonplace as one could be, he ascended to the pinnacle from the very bottom. Thinking back to the time he first entered the Qixin Temple, he was merely a 3 revolutions Grand Yen Immortal. Looking back now, he had become an unparalleled Tao Lord. Compared to other Tao Lords with extraordinary talents, his advancement might not have been exceptionally swift, but the improvement in his combat prowess undoubtedly placed him among the forefront. Now, his true strength allowed him to cut through the Supreme Peak with a single sword strike. When Shang entered the Qixin Temple, he was already a Tier 5 Ultimate Emperor. Once Jian Wushuang completes his Tao merge, he will truly become the foremost inheritor, indisputably the first in terms of both potential and strength. Familiar figures entered the Beiwang Tower one after another. Most of the inheritors here were powerful beings of Tier 4 Emperor and above. Many of those Tier 5 Emperors who entered the Qixin Temple initially had also gone to the Grave God Mountain and returned promptly. The resources in the Grave God Mountain were ultimately limited, and it was impossible to leave so many inheritors there simultaneously. Survival of the fittest. Swish! Wu's figure walked out from the Beiwang Tower, a hint of a smile on his face. 75th floor. Passed. Congratulations, brother Wu's. Jian Wushuang nodded. However, Wu's remained unperturbed, saying loudly, I'm still quite far behind compared to you. I've only broken through to the 5th layer. Your record is still untouched by anyone till now. I just got lucky, Jian Wushuang modestly replied. Now, as he faced Dao Merge, he gradually became more stable. The sharpness of the past was now replaced by restraint. This was also a manifestation of accumulating strength. Aren't you going to give it a try? Wu's curiously asked. He knew that Jian Wushuang's strength was not as simple as it seemed. When he slew Tai-san, Jian Wushuang already possessed the combat power of a top-level Tier 6 emperor. Now, after so many years have passed, his power is likely at the peak of Tier 6. In Beiwang Tower, one could reach the 60th floor. No need to rush. Let them have their fun first. Jian Wushuang paid no attention. For others, challenging the Beiwang Tower might still be beneficial, but for him it was of no use anymore. The origin source of all things belonged to him. His need for the origin source of all things was not as great now. After becoming an emperor, the condensed origin source of all things under his control was probably no weaker than the entire universe. More importantly, he wielded the power of life, even more formidable than the origin source of all things. Swish! Swish! The rankings in Beiwang Tower kept changing. As it was the last opening of the Beiwang Tower, everyone exerted themselves. Many successfully broke through. A familiar acquaintance of Jian Wushuang even broke through 3 consecutive levels, refreshing his own record and the record of a Tier 5 emperor. Ji Chaoyang, the proud young man encountered on the original planet, had now become a powerful Tier 5 ultimate emperor. Although he had not achieved a perfect ultimate Dao, he had successfully merged the Dao when reaching the 8th layer, making him an ultimate emperor on the same level as Shang. His future achievements would at least make him a supreme peak powerhouse. Moreover, he had obtained the inheritance of the Divine General on the Grave God Mountain, and was now a candidate Divine General. Ha ha! My son has the qualifications of a supreme peak. A middle-aged man who bore a striking resemblance to Ji Zhaoyang, the emperor of the Ji family dynasty in the original universe, was elated and boastful about Ji Zhaoyang's performance in the Beiwang Tower, surrounded by a few close friends. This man was the emperor of the Ji family dynasty in the original universe, originally just a Tier 4 emperor, but now he had reached the peak of the Tier 5. Ji Laosan, you've raised a good son. Many people came forward to congratulate him. There were also those who sighed in a corner. Jian Wushuang immediately spotted the Tier 5 peak emperor who was sighing. The father of the god emperor Mo Long? Back in the original planet, Jian Wushuang faced the strongest opponent, Mo Long. At that time, Mo Long's strength and treasures were absolutely beyond imagination. Unfortunately, he fell in the battle against the devouring demon during the siege. Otherwise, he would now be at least a Tier 4 emperor or even a Tier 5 emperor. Struggles and opportunities. Both could lead to downfall. No one could be blamed for it. Jian Wushuang also approached and congratulated Ji Zhaoyang. Their relationship was quite good. Brother Wushuang. Ji Zhaoyang was also excited. As a Tier 5 emperor, he had reached the 57th level, possessing top-notch Tier 6 combat power. Jian Wushuang patted his shoulder and said, "Step into the Tier 6 as soon as possible, and in the future, we'll have a chance to explore the secret realms together. Yeah, when the time comes, bring Hu Qing with us." Ji Zhaoyang just spoke, but then remembered something, and the joy on his face faded. Hu Qing had been sent to the Grave God Mountain by Zhenling and was still in deep sleep. It wasn't easy for him to wake up due to the severe injuries he suffered before. After all, resisting the master of the Azure Dragon Temple was already quite commendable. To survive was considered fortunate. The revival would take some time, and it remained uncertain whether Zhenling had any lingering resentment towards Hu Qing. Ji Chaoyang's father was delighted to see his son having a good relationship with the current influential figure, Jian Wushuang. Currently, Jian Wushuang held the power of the origin source of all things and was willing to give 1/3 of it to these old fellows. Of course, it was necessary to curry favor. Jian Wushuang nodded and replied, "Sure. As for the origin source of all things, it would naturally be evenly distributed. Since the aim was to win people over, fairness was crucial. Otherwise, it might have a counterproductive effect." In the days that followed, millions of inheritors and native emperors traversed all the realms, reaching their peak. Some individuals even challenged repeatedly, completely squeezing out their own potential. Everyone tacitly waited for Jian Wushuang. One reason was for Jian Wushuang to distribute the origin source, and the other was to see him challenge once again. When the rumors spread that Jian Wushuang had beheaded Tai San, they all assumed it was Wu's was behind-the-scenes manipulation. Now, it was the best opportunity for verification. The situation was most awkward for Chang Feng. Regardless of whether Jian Wushuang could successfully challenge, he felt extremely embarrassed. If Jian Wushuang succeeded, it meant he had indeed killed Tai San with his own hands. If he failed, those emperors who boasted about Jian Wushuang would also criticize Tai San for being too weak. "Give me a moment." Jian Wushuang's aura suddenly surged, his robe fluttering like a divine being. This was his last time challenging the Beiwang Tower. During his first attempt, he comprehended the power of life. He attached great importance to the Beiwang Tower, and perhaps this time there might be some surprises. "Wish you great achievements again, Brother Wushuang." Everyone watched as Jian Wushuang entered the teleportation array of the Beiwang Tower, eagerly awaiting. Dongsheng even conjured a massive scoreboard out of thin air, taking out 100 cubic units of universe crystals, and declared, "Everyone, I bet that Brother Wushuang will break through 10 floors again." When he spoke, some were initially puzzled, but fortunately, Wanyan cooperated well and immediately joined in. "Then I bet that Brother Wushuang won't surpass 10 floors. After speaking, he also took out 100 cubic units of universe crystals. This scene was watched with envy by the onlookers. Those were universe crystals. Ordinary Tier 6 emperors couldn't produce them, only the Supreme Peak had such capability. Among the inheritors, only some Tier 6 emperors could afford to play with them. Seeing this, Wu's would directly took out 1,000 cubic units of universe crystals, attracting countless envious gazes. "I'll join the fun with you guys." The 3 palace masters also joined the fray. Some powerful Tier 6 emperors didn't hesitate either, successively taking out universe crystals to join the game. After all, such an opportunity came once in a millennium. Haha. Is there anyone else willing to bet? Now, if you bet that he could beat over 10 floors, the payout is doubled. Dongsheng was quite cheerful. Having bet so many universe crystals, he was well prepared. He had privately asked Jian Wushuang if he could surpass 10 floors. Jian Wushuang had already penetrated through more than 50 floors. Adding 10 more layers meant reaching over 60 layers, attaining Supreme Peak strength. In the eyes of many, this was simply impossible. Except for Dongsheng and the other Tier 6 Peak emperors, as well as the Supreme Peak. On the other hand, for the slightly weaker Tier 5 emperors, betting pools were opened. The whole atmosphere was lively with these movements. In contrast to the outside world, within Beiwang Tower, it was as quiet as death. The black-robed figure holding 6 sharp knives couldn't move, frozen once again. This time, Jian Wushuang carefully observed the star of all things and casually killed the opponent's soul with a swing of his sword. Swoosh! 55th floor, 56th floor, 57th floor. Except for the first, all passed in the blink of an eye. Just a sword strike was enough to deal with the opponent. How is this possible? In a few breaths, Jian Wushuang had already stepped into the 60th floor. This represented the strength of the Supreme Peak. At this moment, Jian Wushuang, under normal circumstances, could unleash the power of entering the Supreme Peak, temporarily reaching the pinnacle with the help of the power of the starry sky. In just the usual state, Jian Wushuang could reach the 63rd floor. Outside, from noisy to silent, everyone held their breath. One more floor, and those emperors who bet that Jian Wushuang couldn't break through more than 10 floors would face bankruptcy. Ding! The number next to Jian Wushuang's name changed again. Passed through the 64th floor. Even the strongest power of Jian Wushuang under normal circumstances could barely reach this level. But this wasn't the end. Clasping his fists, he used his Thopot power to activate the mysterious starry sky. A vast force instantly descended, elevating his aura to the utmost. This was improved based on Broly's transformation Dao. It also contained the ancient secret technique. He created the Starry Sky Chronicles. It couldn't be all about the sword, right? So, using this move, he enhanced himself through the power within the Starry Sky Chronicles. Although brief, it could multiply his strength several times. In the pale blue expanse of the starry sky, an immense power surrounded Jian Wushuang. Even the superficial forces around his body could generate arcs capable of shattering the void. Now, Jian Wushuang was no longer just the peak level. If he unleashed the one-thought universe, he could probably temporarily reach the peak of the supreme peak. You still have a trump card. The Guardian was on the verge of collapse. The first time he encountered Jian Wushuang, he was trampled upon, thinking he could reclaim it later. However, Jian Wushuang did not give him a chance at all. After such a long time, he finally awaited Jian Wushuang's return to Beiwang Tower, only to be continuously suppressed as soon as he entered. Moreover, this time Jian Wushuang's cultivation realm remained unchanged. He was still a Dao Lord. Annihilate! Jian Wushuang pointed, and a burst of extreme light directly ended the opponent's life. Only 6 sharp knives fell to the ground. The space changed once again. Maintaining this peak state probably lasted only the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. This time was enough for him to reach the 70th floor. The onlookers outside were already stunned. Is this a Dao Lord? Dongsheng himself found it unbelievable. Although he knew Jian Wushuang could reach the 60th floor, he did not expect Jian Wushuang to be so abnormal, breaking through to the 70th floor in one go. He regretted not betting on whether Jian Wushuang could break through 15 more floors. The 3 palace masters were also amazed. A Dao Lord who could rival the supreme peak. This was true transcending, crossing a major realm. In ancient times, there was no mention of such a peerless figure. If Emperor Juyun within the supreme peak was an insurmountable mountain, then Jian Wushuang was a towering peak in the eyes of Dao Lords. Now, the most extraordinary Dao Lord on the Grave God Mountain could match a Tier 5 Emperor at best, but Jian Wushuang could rival the Supreme Peak and even possess the combat power of the Supreme Peak. Tai Jian felt a chill in his heart. Fortunately, he was more pragmatic. Not to mention how strong Jian Wushuang would be after integrating with the Dao. He might be able to kill him now. Among the 3 palace masters, the only one who could be compared to Jian Wushuang was Qingyou. Although Palace Master Lu Hua's strength was decent, reaching the 70th floor might be a challenge. If someone could stably surpass Jian Wushuang, it would be Wuxia. Keep going. Ji Chaoyang was so excited, unable to resist reminding, Wushuang, keep going. 71st floor. This time it wasn't as easy. Jian Wushuang's aura kept decreasing, and the peak state was almost at its limit. Until absolutely necessary, he didn't want to unleash that sword move. I thought your power was inexhaustible. The black-robed guardian, wielding 6 sharp knives flawlessly, directly suppressed Jian Wushuang. Although taunting, he had to admit that this Dao Lord was the most remarkable he had ever seen, even more extraordinary than the former Emperor Juyun. After all, the Emperor had mastery over the origin of space. If Jian Wushuang had obtained recognition from the origin source of time in advance, it would indeed be incredible. However, as a Dao Lord, achieving this level, no one could guarantee he wouldn't become the next Emperor Juyun. Perhaps, the next time Jian Wushuang comes, he might continue advancing. Sooner or later, he would be the one who conquers 99 floors. Break! Jian Wushuang roared, pulling out the Juyun sword, shattering the 6 sharp knives with one stroke and dispersing the opponent. He was also panting heavily. Considering his strength, he could reach the 73rd or even 74th floor. But maintaining this peak state took too little time. After each floor, there was a brief pause, wasting a lot of energy. The 71st floor was somewhat challenging, even a bit forced. But on the 72nd floor, Jian Wushuang had absolute confidence. One sword would be enough. A fresh move, conquering all. With this sword strike he had never lost. During the encounter with Broly, if Mieshang hadn't intervened, he would have cut down Broly long ago. Phew! Before the space of the 73rd floor arrived, Jian Wushuang chose to concede. It was time to leave. Having used that sword move, he had no more tricks up his sleeve. As for the One Thought universe, it was still useful in the earlier levels, but its assistance diminished in the later stages. After Jian Wushuang left, the Guardian's face revealed astonishment. The sword move he used on the 72nd floor, he had no strength to counterattack and was completely overwhelmed. Even at the 75th floor, he probably couldn't directly resist that sword strike. After all, the first sword move in the Starry Sky Chronicles was capable of killing powerhouses like Broly. At that time, Broly was already comparable to Wuxia. Passing through 72 floors was, of course, no problem. Upon returning to the Grand Hall, countless gazes turned towards him, filled with astonishment and disbelief. From now on, no one dared to question Jian Wushuang. If a time limit were added countless epochs later, or perhaps in another era, people would still remember the name Jian Wushuang. The invincible Tao Lord. The origin source of all things was divided into millions of parts, and he made sure everyone got a share. Although it seemed insufficient for some powerful beings, for the Tier 4 and Tier 5 emperors, it was a tremendous opportunity. While feeling grateful to Jian Wushuang, they also strove towards him. Before entering seclusion, Jian Wushuang had extensive conversations with the old powerhouses like Dongsheng, discussing the current situation in the original universe, urging them to remain vigilant. He knew a lot but could say very little, merely mentioning the threat posed by that Mo Jun or Demon Lord. In case the opponent managed to lift the restrictions prematurely, and Qixin Temple had no one at the Tribulation Realm, it would be awkward, with only the option to watch Mo Jun slaughter and devour. However, according to Jinling, among the three great true monarchs, Shan Jun was disintegrated, while Mo Jun was suppressed. Their strengths were greatly diminished, with the most powerful being Gu Jun, who was suppressed deep in the first prison. His strength remained intact, at least possessing the power of a sixth tribulation realm. Even if Mo Jun were to break free from the restrictions, having a strength of 3 tribulation would be considered good. Even so, within the Qixin Temple, there was no one who could be considered a match now. Jinling couldn't leave at all, and the avatar that went out was too weak. Zhuangzhong, who had allied with Jinling, was only at the 1 tribulation realm, and his strength was simply inadequate. They had to rely on the inheritors. In addition to the overt threats, there was also Mieshang. The opponent came for the life power within him. The collision of death and life, the planning of countless epochs, all for him. He had to be more cautious. Returning to the familiar cave mansion, it felt empty. Jian Wushuang casually sat cross-legged on the mat, beginning to inventory the treasures at his disposal. There were many treasures that could quickly enhance his strength, and he needed to make use of all that he could. The stronger he became, the more assurance he had. Universe crystals. 300,000 cubic units. Jian Wushuang nodded. Before him appeared a towering mountain, entirely composed of universe crystals. Originally, he had intended to devour these universe crystals, but with the origin source of all things, it was faster to devour the origin source itself. These universe crystals were hard to come by, and he could use them later when he became the emperor. 2/3 of the origin source of all things. A majestic origin source, the origin source of the divine master of all things from the past. The origin source of a 6th tribulation realm powerhouse. Now it belonged to him. He was already very close to the realm of the black hole, and devouring this origin sources was enough to break through. Reaching out with a single hand, he gently touched the origin source of all things. His spiritual awareness expanded greatly, and the vastness of all things entered directly into his body. In just an instant, his body expanded by a circle. This origin source was too pure. Jian Wushuang found it a bit difficult to devour and quickly stopped. Swish! He directly moved the origin source of all things into his own origin source C. Devouring the origin source took a very long time, and he couldn't afford to waste that time. A clone could handle the devouring. He had more important things to do. The chess manual, the Skysight heavenly chessboard, and the inheritance of the first true king could wait for him to cultivate after reaching the Emperor realm. There was no hurry for that. Currently, he needed to comprehend the power brought by the Starry Sky Chronicles. The power of the Starry Sky. This wasn't the power of the Extreme Tao but rather the power of the Sword Tao. Starry Sky Sword Tao. This could be considered Nie Yuan's inheritance. Or rather, it was the Starry Sky inheritance Nie Yuan obtained and passed on to him. Unfortunately, Nie Yuan's strength and potential were too weak. That one sword move directly caused Nie Yuan to die from breathlessness. If he had Nie Yuan's strength, he probably wouldn't have met such a fate. Even now, although he could use that one sword move, the backlash it brought required him to rest for an hour and replenish his life power. This was only possible because he had mastered the power of life. Without it, he might have suffered the same fate as Nie Yuan, dying directly from breathlessness. He hadn't truly mastered the power of the Starry Sky. He only borrowed it, or even stole it. Naturally, there would be repercussions. Moreover, the power of the Starry Sky inherently carried the origin source of time and space, making it difficult for him to bear, let alone combining the two. The first sword move. Jian Wushuang's thoughts manifested in swordsmanship. With one swing, his entire person wilted. Puff! This time, he was directly backlash injured, unable to mobilize his thought power. No, the difference in realms is still too vast. I should wait until I reach the black hole realm to give it another try. Jian Wushuang shook his head. His current realm was indeed too low. The power of the Starry Sky was utterly incomprehensible to him. Creating a simple sword move relied only on a small amount of power. Even the use of the Starry Sky's power to enhance himself was rough. It was time to set aside the Sword Tao. Otherwise, no matter how he played, he would end up smashing it in his own hands. It would be better to first study how to use the power of the Starry Sky within himself and then specialize it in the Tao of the sword. He had mixed things up before. Initially, he applied the power of the Starry Sky to the Sword Tao, then called it into his own body. He used his thought power. A weak force of the Starry Sky appeared at his fingertips. At a glance, its boundaries were indiscernible. His eyes, now able to scrutinize even space, and his thoughts could sense time, but they couldn't penetrate this strand of Starry Sky power. Although it was just a strand, condensed into a small group. Yet, Jian Wushuang saw a vast universe within it. Upon closer inspection, the universe continuously dispersed. It wasn't until he felt groggy that he stopped. Unfathomable. He could only see one universe. Who would have thought that with just this bit of Starry Sky power, it contained a universe, and perhaps even more than one universe? The mystery of the Starry Sky was indeed beyond Jian Wushuang's imagination. In the following time, he remained immersed in it. Mastery of the Tao was not something achieved overnight. He needed ample preparation. He gained enlightenment from the Starry Sky. Perhaps the opportunity for Tao mastery lay within the celestial expanse. Anything was possible. Inside the cave mansion, everything remained unchanged for eternity. Outside the cave mansion, however, changes occurred day by day. The number of trial participants gradually decreased, and the count of inheritors began to stabilize. With the number unchanged, the resources of the Grave God Mountain remained constant. For the inheritors, this was considered good news. However, for Zhenling, it was a colossal piece of bad news. In the temporal river beyond the original universe, at some unknown time, a grand hall identical to the Qixin Temple appeared. This hall stood tall in the temporal river, creating more commotion than even the Qixin Temple. It directly opened its doors to the formidable beings along the entire temporal river. Clearly, it was created by Miesheng, the Temple of World Annihilation. Upon discovering it, Zhenling immediately issued a stern order. Any emperor entering Miesheng's temple was to be executed without mercy. The Temple of World Annihilation and the Qixin Temple were archenemies, engaged in a life-and-death struggle. Though the inheritors knew little about it, they didn't perceive it as a bad thing. Especially Shang, he was even more excited. He headed straight to the temporal river, challenging the Temple of World Annihilation. In just a single era, the powerful figures emerging from the Temple of World Annihilation were no weaker than the inheritors cultivated by the Qixin Temple. Numerous ultimate emperors appeared. It was a momentum opposing the Qixin Temple emerged and was unstoppable. Yet all of this had nothing to do with Jian Wushuang. He remained in seclusion, and the tales about him in the outside world remained unchanged. Many even believed that he had already successfully integrated with the Tao. Jian Wushuang himself wanted to as well. However, when he comprehended the power of the starry sky, he inadvertently let an era slip by. There were no traces of time's passage, yet a long period had elapsed. The four great secret realms were completely unified, with no resistance whatsoever. Now, most of the inheritors had entered the original universe. Although the Qixin Temple no longer absorbed trial participants, those inheritors venturing into the original universe, and even into other universes, opened wide the gates, establishing themselves as founders. These inheritors were considered the first-generation disciples. The second-generation disciples were the powerful individuals nurtured by these inheritors. This was something tacitly approved by Jinling. The emergence of the Temple of World Annihilation disrupted the Qixin Temple's plans, forcing them to make temporary adjustments. The results were quite satisfactory. The River of Time had entered an era of great eruption. The first era could be considered as the universe's initial exploration. The second era marked the appearance of Qixin Temple, a brief yet splendid period. The third era unfolded as a time of conflict between two temples. Both sides invested vast resources, fully unlocking the potential of the temporal river. The days of the Tier 5 emperors, once the era of the strong, had already passed. Now, venturing through the River of Time, if you weren't a Tier 6 emperor, you would hesitate to claim strength. It could already be foreseen that extraordinary strong individuals would emerge in the future of this temporal river. A single era's time was not enough. In the first era, many Supreme Peak experts appeared, but there was still no sign of reaching the Tribulation Realm. Originally, everyone had high hopes for Xiang. After all, he was the first ultimate emperor. However, an entire era passed without any movement. He had been continuously seeking a confrontation with the Temple of World Annihilation at the Supreme Peak, but there was no indication of a breakthrough. Nevertheless, his strength was terrifyingly formidable and had subtly become the top figure in the temporal river. This temporal river also gained a reputation, though not in the name of strength, but in connection with the two temples. The Niechi temporal space. When this name surfaced, Jinling was on the verge of directly declaring war on the Temple of World Annihilation. But the more he thought about it, the more fearful he became. The initial prophecy was too accurate. To truly annihilate the Qixin Temple. In comparison to the outside world, Jian Wushuang's accumulation was also extremely vast. In the power of the starry sky, he gazed down upon it, feeling remarkably at ease. Now, utilizing the power of the starry sky, he had already created two pinnacle secret techniques. Starry Sky Chronicles, a sword Tao imbued with the power of the starry sky. Eternal Ancient Transformation, a transformation Tao imbued with the power of the starry sky. In the past, when reaching the peak state, he could only maintain it for an incense stick's worth of time. Now he could sustain it for a whole hour. This was only the first transformation of the Eternal Ancient Transformation. After becoming the Emperor, he would continue down this path. As for the Starry Sky Chronicles, he hadn't delved into it much, only perfecting the first sword move. The backlash time it brought him gradually shortened. He could even compensate for the backlash with the power of life, but the cost was that within an hour, he couldn't unleash the second sword move. However, this was still a tremendous success. This way, after casting the first sword of the Starry Sky Chronicles, he could still maintain the peak state. He wouldn't experience a drastic drop in his realm as he did in the past after casting the first sword move. In this epoch, he reaped a lot. His spatial realm reached the black hole realm. The coveted black hole realm was finally attained. Moreover, the origin source of all things still had more than half remaining. After the Tao merge, he could go and compete for the peak of the black hole realm. He hadn't yet achieved integration with the Tao, and yet already pondering how to reach the tribulation realm. Complete mastery of space, the pinnacle secret technique. At this point, he could be considered to have made preliminary progress. After the Tao merge, relying on the power of the starry sky, he could refine the pinnacle secret technique to perfection. Crossing into the universe realm of space was the simplest. It was also his greatest reliance for increasing strength. Once mastering universe space, his mere thought might indeed transform the universe illusion into a real universe. Combine that with the power of life. Jian Wushuang had already started yearning. If the universe he created with his thought power could give birth to life, wouldn't that mean he could open up a universe? However, there was a troublesome point. Having the power of life but lacking the origin source was unacceptable. He couldn't possibly use the power of all things to evolve the origin source of all things. That would only weaken his strength. Sky sight heavenly chessboard. Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up as he thought of something. He had plenty of origin sources, all in the sky sight heavenly chessboard. If he integrated the sky sight heavenly chessboard into the one thought universe, combined with his power of life, wouldn't he be able to resurrect the pieces on the board? If it happened that way, Jian Wushuang could already imagine a scene in the future when he fought against others, with a group of powerful beings emerging from the sky sight heavenly chessboard. Swallowing his saliva, he stopped daydreaming. Everything was happening quickly. Let his strength prove it all. The Tao merge was right in front of him. Time to embark. Heading west. Whoosh! Directly tearing through the fabric of space, he appeared above the Yuanyang Lake. With a sweep of his thought power, Jian Wushuang furrowed his brow. Where are the people? Jian Wushuang wondered. He noticed that the formidable experts of the entire Elder Palace were at least 99% fewer. Moreover, they were all unfamiliar faces. Just as he was puzzled, a figure appeared in front of him. The person was none other than Wu Zhua, but only one of Wu's was avatars. Now that the temporal river was caught in the opposition of the Qixin Temple and the Temple of World Annihilation were in opposition, frequent conflicts occurred, and his main body needed to stay outside to oversee matters. Currently, the struggle between the two factions extended across the universe. Wushuang, I thought you were going to directly perform the Tao merge this time. Wu Zhua chuckled. Jian Wushuang shook his head and replied, before merging with Tao, I need to make a trip to the Mahayana Spirit Mountain in the western region. True. I'll transmit your message to the ancestral master of the Mahayana Spirit Mountain, so that they can come directly. Wu Zhua spoke with the same domineering tone, seeking help from others but making them come over directly. Although Jian Wushuang was somewhat uncomfortable with this approach, he was still grateful. However, this time he intended to go in person. Given the gravity of the situation, he couldn't act recklessly. He politely declined Wu Zhua's kindness and inquired about the current situation. The number of experts in the Elder Palace had sharply decreased, and it seemed that the current powerful figures in the Elder Palace were all native emperors. Upon hearing Jian Wushuang's confusion, Wu Zhua recounted the significant and minor events that had occurred in this era. The Temple of World Annihilation. Jian Wushuang's pupils contracted, his voice trembling. He could be absolutely certain that this was definitely orchestrated by Mieshang. The external world was indeed in chaos now. Fortunately, the opponent stood in the open, and Jian Wushuang could finally breathe a sigh of relief. As long as the opponent was in the open, he had nothing to fear. He feared that the opponent would remain concealed, making it impossible for him to venture out. Even so, he would not leave the Qixin Temple. What if Mieshang was waiting for him? What would he do? He dared not take the risk and decided to follow the orders of Jinling. Wu Zhua, I will leave first. Perhaps, for a long time to come, I won't return to the Elder Palace. Take care of yourself. Jian Wushuang clasped his fists. The other had helped him a lot, and he remembered the favor. It seemed that Wu Zhua had not become the palace master yet. He was still the hall master of the law enforcement hall. However, in the current chaos outside, the position of the hall master of the law enforcement hall was probably not much weaker than that of the palace master. After successfully merging the Tao, he would go to the Grave God Mountain. It was estimated that he would leave this temporal river. Meeting again might really not be easy. Wu Zhua seemed to have realized this too. He also clasped his fists. but this time he didn't say much. He sincerely said, "Take care." Then Jian Wushuang tiptoed, vanished in an instant in the void, and headed towards the central hall. Wuxia, standing in the same place, watched Jian Wushuang's departing figure. After a while he left as well. During Jian Wushuang's flight, he did not encounter the old man with goat horns. It seemed that there was no chance for a farewell at his door. It was Qiu Huang's avatar that had been guarding the central hall all along. Seeing Jian Wushuang, the originally dozing avatar immediately became alert. "Jian Wushuang," Qiu Huang smiled and said, "You, kid, finally came out of seclusion." Jian Wushuang descended slowly, revealing a smile, and walked towards Qiu Huang at a leisurely pace. When the two met, it was as if it were their first encounter in Qiu Huang City. Casually sitting on a set of steps, he looked up at Qiu Huang without a care in the world. The other had already reached Tier 6, reportedly doing well in the outside world. Instead of going to the human realm, the avatar had gone to the earth realm. After chatting for a while, Jian Wushuang stood up, preparing to leave. Before entering the teleportation array, Qiu Huang hesitated and finally called out to Jian Wushuang, "Elder Yang has fallen." This news dated back half an epoch. At that time, the struggle for the universe was at its peak, and Yang Sanmu, a divine craftsman and a peak-level Tier 6 emperor, was transferred from the rear to the front line. It was his voluntary choice, but unfortunately, he encountered a supreme peak expert. Upon hearing this news, Jian Wushuang was first stunned, then slowly turned his head. His eyes happened to meet the hilt of his Jueyun sword. It was the peerless divine sword that the old Yanghorn had obtained at great cost from the hands of the Vermilion Bird Temple Master. Who did it? Jian Wushuang stood still, leaning against Qiu Huang. His facial expression couldn't be seen, but his tone had dropped sharply to freezing point. Qiu Huang's voice also sounded somewhat hoarse. After all, they had been brothers for many years, and he was also saddened. It was Broly, the top powerhouse of the Temple of World Annihilation. Crack. Jian Wushuang's footsteps were crisp as he walked directly onto the teleportation array, leaving behind a brief sentence. "I will avenge him." The statement was decisive and ordinary. However, as the teleportation array activated, Jian Wushuang's expression turned fierce within the colorful channel. He turned around, gazing at Qiu Huang's position, and roared, "I will definitely avenge him. Such is karma." Back then, he casually let someone kill Broly's father, and now Broly effortlessly killed Yang Sanmu. Those who kill will be killed. No one to blame. It's just that when it happens to someone, that's when the anger arises. A common occurrence in the mortal realm. At this level, things don't change. Perhaps they are all still just mortals. Since understanding the power of the starry sky, sometimes he would wonder if the universe he lived in was also a convergence of forces. Maybe, maybe not. A month later, on the pale yellow continent in the western region, a figure flew steadily. Upon entering the western region, Jian Wushuang did not bother using teleportation arrays but chose to fly slowly. In the heavenly realm, many powerful beings had been transferred elsewhere. Perhaps those powerhouses had volunteered. Everyone aspires to a larger world. Zhenling might have made a promise that any native emperor leaving the Qixin Temple could receive assistance in restoring their origin source. However, they had to make a solemn vow not to betray the Qixin Temple. This requirement was not unreasonable, prompting countless individuals to rush to the outside world. Once reaching the Emperor Cultivation realm, they could leave. Even the weakest would not contribute much to the situation outside. Now, most of the strong beings in the heavenly realm were merely avatars holding their ground. The true selves had all ventured out. Being able to repair the origin source was a tremendous opportunity, and everyone wished to seize it. So much so that as Jian Wushuang soared through the skies, he didn't encounter a single emperor. All were just avatars. In the past, even if the heavenly realm were peaceful, there would likely be a few arrogant demonic emperors. Now, it seemed that these individuals had all gone to the temporal river. It was like a bird whose wings were suddenly healed after being broken, and it was released from its cage. Jian Wushuang felt the same way now. He also wanted to go out and explore, To the west, the Mahayana Spirit Mountain. It was right in front of him. On the majestic golden mountain, faint Buddhist chants echoed, and golden light shimmered. As Jian Wushuang approached the mountain gate, he stopped. After all, he was seeking help, and it wouldn't do to be disrespectful. I am Jian Wushuang, coming to pay my respects to the mountain. Jian Wushuang clasped his fists, his face filled with goodwill. The guardians of the mountain gate were only two young novices, but in the external world, this was the greatest benevolence. One of the novices, spotless and pure, took a step forward to Jian Wushuang. With hands joined together and a slight bow, he spoke, "Kind sir, please wait a moment. Thank you." Jian Wushuang clasped his hands together, returning the courtesy. On the Mahayana Spirit Mountain, in a quaint backyard, several Bodhi trees outlined the appearance of an ordinary worldly setting. A powerful spiritual practitioner residing in this place sat cross-legged under one of the Bodhi trees, immersed in deep meditation. As Jian Wushuang arrived, the Bodhi prayer beads in the practitioner's hand suddenly came to a halt. Meanwhile, a voice echoed from outside. "Elder Miaoyi, the master requests your presence." The bald woman sitting in meditation under the Bodhi tree was none other than Gong Miaoyi. Since her release by the Elder Palace, she had come to the Mahayana Spirit Mountain and chosen to immerse herself in the Buddhist teachings, paying no attention to the outside world. Jian Wushuang had become her inner demon, to the extent that even after an entire era, she had not completely eradicated him. Now, with Jian Wushuang's arrival and the mountain master of the Mahayana Spirit Mountain summoning her, today might be the best opportunity to bring closure. Compared to her past ruthlessness, Gong Miaoyi had transcended the ordinary and truly detached herself from worldly grievances. Although sensing Jian Wushuang's aura still made her somewhat uncomfortable, she could approach it with equanimity. After the fall of Nieyuan, not to mention Jian Wushuang's presence, merely hearing his name would drive her into a frenzy, wanting desperately to kill Jian Wushuang. Deep within the Spirit Mountain, Buddha fruits stood in abundance, each occupant an emperor, with the weakest among them being at the peak level Tier 4. In the Mahayana Spirit Mountain, only those who achieved the supreme peak were entitled to be called Buddha Lords. Currently, the Spirit Mountain boasted 3 Buddha Lords. In other words, there were 3 supreme peak experts, solidifying their dominance over the western region. In the northern region, no faction possessed 3 supreme peak experts simultaneously. The western region, compared to the northern region, was significantly more powerful. In the Spirit Mountain Hall, atop the main seat, Qianxing Buddha Lord, adorned in a robe of 1,000 stars, with a benevolent expression, was explaining the profound mysteries of the 3,000 Buddhas to the Buddhas below. The arrival of Jian Wushuang caused a slight upward twitch of his eyebrows. Most of the formidable figures from the 4 great secret realms had ventured into the external temporal river, leaving none of the supreme peak experts of the Mahayana Spirit Mountain to emerge. All things have their destined causes. This was the last sentence Qianxing Buddha Lord spoke to the assembly, and it was also directed at those strong-willed individuals anxious to enter the temporal river. Now that the causes and effects had arrived, the Mahayana Spirit Mountain was about to relocate into the temporal river. Jian Wushuang was one of those causes. "Pu Shi, go and welcome our distinguished guest. I'll be waiting for you under the Gyudi tree," Qianxing Buddha said, and his figure faintly disappeared. At the same time, Qianxing Buddha also informed Gong Miaoyi. The implication was clear. Upon receiving the order, Pu Shi Bodhisattva descended calmly towards the foot of the Spirit Mountain. Meanwhile, Jian Wushuang remained patiently waiting. This visit was twofold: to resolve the karmic calamity and to acquire the heart of the beast god. Once the karmic calamity was lifted, Jian Wushuang could directly merge with the Tao. Obtaining the heart of the beast god would not only enhance his beast god weapon to its perfect form but also become one of his strongest treasures after becoming an emperor. In the early days of Tao Lord, he relied on the beast god weapon to dominate the 4 corners. Could be said that without the beast god weapon, he wouldn't be where he is today. The beast god weapon not only elevated his divine body but also enhanced his comprehension of space. And he possessed his own domain, Though not as vast as the one-thought universe with a single thought, it consumed very little, and he could instantly form a small-scale beast-god domain, unleashing the power of madness, enhancing his combat strength in close-quarters battles. This extraordinary treasure must be obtained. Of course, he wouldn't resort to robbery. It would be best if it could be negotiated. He had quite a few treasures on him right now, including 1/3 of the origin source of all things, enough to exchange for the beast god heart. Although the individual heart of the beast god was the strongest component of the beast god candle dragon, its power, no matter how formidable, was still inferior to the universe treasure. At most, it could rival top-tier eternal treasures. If possible, he was willing to offer 10 top-tier eternal treasures for the exchange. Kind sir, my Buddha Lord invites you. The arriving Pu-Shi Bodhisattva was very polite, bowing slightly to welcome Jian Wushuang. Pu-Shi was indeed a genuine Tier 6 emperor. Upon hearing this, Jian Wushuang also slightly returned the gesture of respect and followed behind, entering the Mahayana Spirit Mountain. After stepping in, the sound of Buddhist chants brought a sense of liberation to his soul, making him quite comfortable. This spirit mountain was truly extraordinary. No wonder resolving karmic calamities required the Buddhist path. Following Pu-Shi Bodhisattva, Jian Wushuang felt that the latter's pace was neither fast nor slow. As a guest, he didn't want to say much, so he took the opportunity to inquire about the matters concerning the Spirit Mountain. According to Jian Wushuang's knowledge, Mahayana Spirit Mountain, like many other ancient sites, was a Tao arena of a universe master from ancient times. However, the universe master's universe had already perished, and the mountain was then placed within the 4 great secret realms. Subsequent inheritances, as universally mentioned, involved cultivating one's body and spirit within the 4 great secret realms, with countless epochs passing without much commotion. Few powerful beings emerged into the world, and they remained low-key. Jian Wushuang nodded, recalling that Gong Miaoyi was also in this place. He inquired about Gong Miaoyi from Pu-Shi, who paused upon hearing her name and replied, "Miaoyi Xianxia is a guest of our master, who arrived at the Spirit Mountain for cultivation a millennium ago. How is she now?" Jian Wushuang pursued. Pu-Shi answered cautiously, "All is well." "That's good," Jian Wushuang said indifferently. "Since we have some friendship, I won't disturb her during her cultivation." Originally, he intended to meet her, especially after inheriting her father's legacy. However, upon arriving, he felt a bit guilty towards Gong Miaoyi, deciding it would be better not to meet her in person and instead send some treasures through someone else. The two walked along the spacious Arhat Avenue and entered deeper into the mountain. The Gyuti tree was a long-standing tree on the Spirit Mountain, where only 3 Buddhas were qualified to cultivate. Very few people usually came to this place. It was rumored that this Gyuti tree could allow one to cultivate a second primordial spirit, but it remained just a rumor. No one had truly achieved it to date. However, the information about this tree was tightly controlled by the 3 Buddha lords, and very little was known about it in the outside world. Jian Wushuang didn't expect that he would be invited to this place, giving him some confidence. It seemed that this time would go smoothly. In the presence of the Venerable, Jian Wushuang pays respects to Qianxing Buddha Lord. The other party, a Tao Lord at the Supreme Peak, naturally deserved the courtesy of a junior. Jian Wushuang joined his hands and bowed, showing great respect. Qianxing Buddha, with smiling eyes, calmly spoke, "A virtuous person is not constrained. Please have a seat." With a slight gesture, a cushion flies to the opposite side of the Lord of 1,000 Stars. Jian Wushuang approached slowly and sat cross-legged. "Friend Wushuang, truly extraordinary." Qianxing Buddha personally poured tea for Jian Wushuang and continued, "I've only heard about it before, but seeing it today, it seems your strength surpasses the rumors." Jian Wushuang lifts the teacup, took a sip, and modestly said, "Buddha Lord, your praise is too generous." His current strength was indeed a level higher than before, but he maintained a humble attitude. After some courtesy, Jian Wushuang got straight to the point and discussed the purpose of his visit. The 2 purposes were quite simple: to lift the karmic calamity and obtain the heart of the beast god. Xianxia Buddha set down his teacup, hands tucked into his kasaya, and said, "I am aware of the virtuous one's karmic calamity, which is not difficult for me. However, the virtuous one will have to undergo significant torment, and I wonder—" "No problem," Jian Wushuang interrupted. Torment was something he had encountered before. He truly didn't mind. "Very well, since it's the case. Once the virtuous one's karmic calamity is lifted, the heart of the beast god will be presented as well." Chuanxing Buddha generously agreed. Jian Wushuang was also delighted. He didn't expect things to go so smoothly. He was afraid of making the situation unpleasant, considering he was seeking someone else's help. "I have 2 treasures here. They are of little use to me, but they are exceptional for the Buddhist path," Jian Wushuang said, taking out 2 wooden boxes from his sleeve. These treasures were purchased at a great cost from the temple. Passing by the temple headquarters, he happened to encounter Guangmu Tianzuan, who gave some guidance. As a result, he acquired these 2 priceless items. It took a whopping 100,000 universe crystals. Even Mahayana Spirit Mountain, with its ancient heritage, likely had very few cosmos crystals stored on the mountain. Even with 100,000, there was nowhere to buy such treasures. One item was the Bodhi bracelet, an essential item for the Buddhist sect. Almost everyone had one. But the one in Jian Wushuang's hands was extraordinary. It was obtained in ancient times when a divine master under the command of Qishan went to other temporal rivers and killed a demon monk. The demonic aura within had long been cleared, leaving only the power of Buddhism, its might comparable to universe treasures. Another item was prepared specifically for Qianxing Buddha, a relic formed from the remains of a universe master after their transcendence. This item was of immeasurable help to Qianxing. Now that Jinling could help them restore their origin source, and with the origin source complete, they naturally wanted to advance further and reach the realm of tribulation. This relic could help Qianxing shorten that process. In the Buddhist sect, no one would refuse a relic. Despite Qianxing's repeated reluctance, he eventually accepted it into his embrace. Both sides exchanged smiles. Meanwhile, Gong Miaoi was also brought to the Gyudi tree by someone. As soon as that aura appeared, Jian Wushuang's expression froze. For a moment, he didn't understand what the other party meant. He came to lift the karmic calamity, invited Gong Miaoi to come over, so wasn't he intentionally causing trouble? However, since the other party had invited him, he naturally didn't dare to be neglectful. When Jian Wushuang noticed that Gong Miaoi's expression wasn't pleasant, he felt awkward. Standing up, he could only politely greet her. "Taoist Miaoi, how have you been lately? Thanks to your blessings, everything is fine." Gong Miaoi only showed a slight smile, giving a perfunctory response. At this moment, Qianxing stood up and took on the role of peacemaker. After he spoke, Jian Wushuang understood why Gong Miaoi had come. As it turned out, when the karmic calamity needed to be resolved, one had to enter the ancient formation inside Mahayana Spirit Mountain. And to preside over the formation, they needed someone familiar with Jian Wushuang's karmic ties. Gong Miaoi was the perfect candidate. Realizing this, Jian Wushuang remained composed. He followed Qianxing towards the large formation inside the Spirit Mountain. On the way, he walked side by side with Gong Miaoi, and they did not exchange words because both harbored secrets. In Jian Wushuang's heart, there was a sense of unease. This time, he felt like someone was plotting against him. How could it be so coincidental? He came to Mahayana Spirit Mountain to resolve his karmic calamity. But Gong Miaoi had entered the mountain in advance. Could there be someone manipulating things behind the scenes? Naturally, he was worried about Mieshang. Jian Wushuang communicated directly with Jinling through the close-range board provided by Qishan Temple, but there was no response from the other side, causing a momentary disturbance in his heart. "No, I need to steady myself first." Jian Wushuang forcibly suppressed his concerns. It was the time to resolve his karmic calamity, and if he panicked, he might not need anyone else's schemes. He would ruin himself. "We're here." Qianxing Buddha stopped and pointed to a cave, saying, "Inside is the core of the formation. Taoist Miaoi, you only need to preside over the formation outside the cave." Upon hearing this, Gong Miaoi didn't linger. She went straight to the cave, sat cross-legged at the entrance, and several flags appeared in front of her, the central part of the formation. Although Jian Wushuang had some doubts in his heart, he still entered with determination. However, before going in, he directly displayed the ancient transformation, reaching the peak of his strength. If he were to make a move now, probably no one in Mahayana Spirit Mountain would survive. Before entering, he first smiled friendly at Xianxia and then looked at Gong Miaoyi, saying, "I feel guilty about Nieyuan's death. Since I have inherited your father's swordsmanship, I will vindicate him in the future." After hearing this, there was a noticeable change in Gong Miaoyi's expression, but she did not respond to what Jian Wushuang had just said. Jian Wushuang wasn't surprised, and he directly walked into the cave. After he entered the cave, Qianxing Buddha revealed a subtly imperceptible smile, and a thought power transmitted the message that Jian Wushuang had entered the formation through the Buddhist beads in his hand. However, it is unknown who received this message. As for Jian Wushuang, once inside the cave, it was pitch black all around, and nothing could be seen. As he walked forward, he felt increasingly uneasy. He forgot to inform Zhenling when he came. Perhaps he was too careless, thinking that after his strength underwent another transformation, these 4 great secret realms could no longer threaten his existence. Or maybe before entering this place, he should have asked Qianxing what abilities the formation inside possessed to eliminate his karmic calamity. Now he was confused and could only keep walking forward. Light! As Jian Wushuang walked, he saw a light in front of him. His heart moved, as if he had grasped something. In the dark space around him, seeing a spot of light naturally meant catching hope. Go! He quickened his pace, wanting to reach the source of the light as soon as possible. However fast he walked, the light remained in place, and he couldn't reach it at all. Something's wrong. Jian Wushuang shook his head. The light was not in the spatial realm here. His spatial realm had already reached the level of a black hole, and his vision was naturally penetrating. Just a moment of panic caused him to forget. This made him stop, close his eyes, no longer relying on his physical eyes, but using the origin source of space to comprehend the spatial characteristics of this place. In the segmented 9th-dimensional space, surrounded by celestial bodies, Jian Wushuang appeared as a black hole. Turns out it's here. A faint smile graced Jian Wushuang's face as he took a step and directly reached the source of light. The surrounding darkness instantly vanished, swallowed by the light. Jian Wushuang emerged from the mountain cave. He looked around, surprised by the outside world's gaze. "Why are you out again?" Gong Miaoyi exclaimed in surprise. Qianxing Buddha, who had been waiting on the side, was equally astonished and spoke. "Kind sir, how did you return so quickly?" Jian Wushuang was even more surprised. How come the location of the light source was the entrance he came from? He had entered the cave mansion for almost a day, and after all the twists and turns, he unexpectedly came out again. "No!" Jian Wushuang suddenly shook his head. He couldn't sense the killing intent brought about by causality in his body anymore. The karma-killing calamity had been lifted. He actually lifted the karma-killing calamity just like that. This seemed too simple. Qianxing Buddha walked over, his face filled with joy, and congratulated. "Congratulations, Taoist Wushuang. The karma-killing calamity has been lifted. Is it that easy?" Gong Miaoyi, sitting cross-legged at the entrance of the cave, was somewhat puzzled. Jian Wushuang also found it unbelievable, but now it had indeed come to an end. With the karma-killing calamity gone, he felt incredibly relaxed and could proceed with the Tao fusion. In joy, Jian Wushuang let go of everything. He was about to integrate the Tao and soon become an emperor. The road to the peak was getting closer and closer. With the karma-killing calamity lifted, he had no reason to stay here. After obtaining the beast god heart, Jian Wushuang directly took the teleportation array inside the Mahayana Spirit Mountain and headed to the central region of the heavenly realm, the headquarters of the divine temple. The next target, Grave God Mountain. Depart. But when he arrived at the headquarters of the divine temple, he found many emperors gathered there. Their expressions were extremely solemn, and Guangmu Tianzuan personally led the team. Brother Guangmu, where are you all heading? Jian Wushuang noticed that these emperor powerhouses were all inheritors, with no indigenous emperors among them. Most of these inheritors were at the Tier 4 level, with a few at Tier 5, and only one at the Tier 6. Clearly, these inheritors were rising talents. When Guangmu Tianzuan saw Jian Wushuang with a solemn expression, he sighed and said, Mo Jun has appeared, joining forces with the Temple of World Annihilation. They are launching a major attack on the universe controlled by the Qixin Temple. The external war is escalating, and our manpower is somewhat insufficient. We can only let these inheritors go first. Mo Jun has appeared. Jian Wushuang's face trembled, exclaiming, How can this happen so quickly? Wasn't it supposed to take several epochs? That was just a speculation. It's also possible that the powerhouses of the Temple of World Annihilation took action secretly and released Mo Jun ahead of schedule. Guangmu Tianzuan replied. Before they could say much, a majestic voice descended. It was Zhenling. The avatar of Zhenling descended, taking these inheritors away from the Qixin Temple. Seeing Jian Wushuang also present and the karmic calamity already resolved, Zhenling spoke. Jian Wushuang, seize the time to integrate the Tao. This time, Miashang has come for you. After saying this, Zhenling and the group disappeared through the teleportation array, leaving Jian Wushuang alone in the original place. He hadn't expected the war to come so soon. For a moment, he didn't know where to go. After a brief consideration, Jian Wushuang was about to head to the God's Tomb secret realm to prepare for the Tao merge on Grave God Mountain. However, suddenly, everything darkened in front of him, and his figure seemed to disappear. Everything turned into darkness. Countless memories flooded into his mind. Had he integrated the Tao? No. He was currently in the midst of the Tao merge. What is this? Jian Wushuang was completely at a loss. He had been in the heavenly realm just a moment ago, and the next moment he was in a secret chamber integrating the Tao. And his spatial origin source had actually reached the pinnacle of the black hole realm, currently devouring the Sword Tao and Extreme Tao Sea. A massive cosmic diagram was expanding. He was about to succeed in the Tao merge. A vast force surged into his body, a power surpassing the supreme peak. Tao merge. Jian Wushuang acted uncontrollably. Although he didn't know exactly what was happening, he was constantly paying attention to the method of Tao merge. The black hole swallowed the Sword Tao and integrated with the Extreme Tao. Finally, it ascended to the cosmic space. In one step, he reached the perfect state of the supreme peak. Just one step away from the tribulation realm. Jian Wushuang hadn't even had a chance to be happy when everything in front of him turned black again. This time, he didn't know how long he had been asleep. When he woke up, he felt exhausted and in pain all over his body. The Tao merge had failed. The cosmic space shattered, and within his origin source C, several rounds of scorching dark light balls rose, continuously destroying his origin source. This time, Jian Wushuang found that he could control his body. What's going on? Jian Wushuang's face darkened. A sudden merging and an abrupt failure. He clearly didn't do anything. Why did the Tao merge fail? He was unwilling. If the Tao merge failed, it meant that for the rest of his life, he would be unable to move a step and could only stay in this place. Not only that, his power would be constrained, and he would have to endure the backlash of suppressing the origin source C, or else he would fall. Although the Tao merge failed, he had mastered the cosmic space. Cosmic secret techniques, after merging the Tao, naturally reached the Mahayana realm. Perfect supreme peak. But there was no vitality. Vitality! Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered as he suddenly thought of something. Since leaving Mahayana Spirit Mountain, it seemed like he had never felt the power of life. The problem must lie in Mahayana Spirit Mountain. Dragging his weary body, Jian Wushuang stood up directly. He wanted to see where he was now. The heavy black stone door swung open as he pushed it, and a beam of light hit his face. The outside world's glaring light became apparent. It was a secluded valley, but it was no ordinary valley. Looking at the distant river in the sky, Jian Wushuang found himself within the temporal river. This place wasn't the Qixin Temple, nor the original universe. It was the temporal river. Boom! Kill, kill, kill. The once quiet valley was instantly obliterated. Overwhelming murderous intent descended. Rocks shattered, and countless massive dust clouds rose, shrouding the sky like an apocalyptic scene. Its people from the Temple of World Annihilation. Run! Several emperors flew out from the mountain caves, each brandishing their treasures, ready to face the impending battle. Gigantic halls, treasures beyond measure, shifted from the void. Countless powerful beings arrived in an instant. Jian Wushuang's heart stirred, but he couldn't care less. He unsheathed his sword directly. Wushuang, why haven't you left yet? The speaker was familiar to Jian Wushuang, Emperor Dongsheng. At this moment, Dongsheng had become a supreme peak powerhouse. Leading several Tier 6 emperors, he confronted the flying palaces. Seeing Jian Wushuang, he angrily shouted, "Hurry! Don't let Miesheng find you. Otherwise, this temporal river will truly be finished." "Miesheng, do you know Miesheng?" Jian Wushuang asked in surprise. Shouldn't this information be concealed? It seemed that the situation had reached the brink of collapse, or rather, the Qixin temple had already collapsed, and they were merely resisting desperately. This must be a dream. Jian Wushuang shook his head. He couldn't believe it, nor did he want to. In the previous moment, he had just left Mahayana Spirit Mountain. How did he suddenly find himself in the temporal river, and why did his merging with the Tao fail? Dongsheng, where is Jinling? Where did Shang, Hu Qing, and the others go? Jian Wushuang, though skeptical of the reality of this world, couldn't resist inquiring about the current state of the temporal river. Dongsheng's eyes were filled with passion, his lips trembling. "They're all dead. They died for the original universe, for you. You must survive." After saying this, a hand knife directly slashed at Jian Wushuang's neck, and he once again blacked out and fainted. Meanwhile, in the Temple of World Annihilation, the robust and domineering Broly sat on the throne. "Report. Jian Wushuang has been found. In the Infinite Valley. Move out." Originally, only a small team of Temple of World Annihilation's powerhouses appeared above the Infinite Valley. Now, the terrifying Broly personally took action, leading countless troops, sweeping towards the valley once again. At this moment in the temporal river, living beings were in misery, and countless universes were completely desolate. Shan Jun had merged with the 4 devouring demons, restoring the power of the ancient true lord. Mo Jun had long broken free from the restrictions, beginning to devour numerous universes to compensate for his lost strength. The most powerful Gu Jun had yet to join the battle. Just these 3 true monarch made it impossible for the Qixin temple to resist. Not to mention Miesheng. This temporal river was ultimately heading towards destruction. At some unknown moment, Jian Wushuang felt a pain in his neck and woke up. At that moment, he was lying on a soft bed. "You're awake." A somewhat familiar voice made Jian Wushuang struggle to open his eyes. With some disbelief at the person before him, he overcame his body's fatigue and sat up directly, staring at the woman in front of him, saying, "How can it be you? Have you forgotten your promise back then?" The woman said and then disappeared. "Promise? Yes." He seemed to have made a promise to an ordinary woman on Demon Sound Mountain. Jian Wushuang just remembered, but the other party had already disappeared. Phew! Now he fully understood. This place is definitely not real, or perhaps it is real. It's just different from what happened in his original time and space. I should be on Mahayana Spirit Mountain now. Jian Wushuang's eyes were determined. As for the current time and space, it should be in the future. In the future, he failed in the Tao merge. He embarked on the road of no return. The Temple of World Annihilation really carried out the act of world annihilation. "Senior Wushuang!" A shout made Jian Wushuang open his eyes again. This time, Jian Wushuang was not surprised. Seeing the young man with dark skin and a lean body in front of him, he calmly said, "Xianxia." It was the wandering cultivator he encountered in the human realm. Just as he saw at that time, Xianxia's potential was enormous, and now he had become a supreme peak powerhouse. "Where are we going?" Jian Wushuang quickly immersed himself in this new world, not dwelling on past matters. Living in the present, he didn't understand why he found himself in a future time, but regardless of where he was determined to step onto the boundless path. He had to traverse the path of the strong. Xianxia lifted a bowl of water, handed it to Jian Wushuang, and said, "The infinite valley has been destroyed. We are heading to the Demon Sound Mountain now. It is still intact, and Divine General Mayin will be alive. We can resist for a while there." "Good." Jian Wushuang nodded, stabilized his breath after taking a sip of water. After briefly familiarizing himself with his body, he realized that his current strength was hundreds of times more powerful than before merging with the Tao. But he couldn't sustain prolonged battles at the moment, or he would fall. "Xianxia, I need to ask you, how did Qixin Temple perish?" Jian Wushuang voiced the doubts in his heart. He needed to understand why Qixin Temple in the future timeline suddenly collapsed. Xianxia lowered his head, furrowing his brows, reluctant to bring it up. "Speak. I can handle it." Jian Wushuang's absorbed memories were fragmented, and he had no recollection of the destruction of Qixin Temple in the future timeline. It was Lord Zhenling. Xianxia's eyes held back tears, struggling to say, "Lord Zhenling, with his own hands, destroyed Qixin Temple." Before the collapse of Qixin Temple, Lord Zhenling moved everyone to the temporal river. Jian Wushuang was completely stunned. The water bowl in his hand fell, making a crisp sound, and only then did Jian Wushuang regain his composure. Zhenling destroyed Qixin Temple. This was truly unexpected. If the future timeline deviated from his original timeline, it shouldn't be Zhenling destroying Qixin Temple. Could it be? Jian Wushuang suddenly thought of something. Miashang, in the beginning, had the freedom to come and go at Qixin Temple, perhaps understanding it even more than Zhenling. The other's identity was mysterious, likely connected to the Qixin of the past. Behind all this, it was probably the Qixin of the past who set up this chessboard. In the future timeline, Zhenling, for the grand plan of Qixin, chose to abandon Qixin Temple. After realizing this, Jian Wushuang took a slow, deep breath. The arrival of Qixin Temple brought him endless opportunities and countless illusions. Now it was time to break through all of this. "Xianxia, I'm sorry." The determination in Jian Wushuang's eyes intensified, and his aura suddenly reached its peak. In the future, the eternal ancient transformation was even stronger. Now, he probably could rival the Tribulation Realm. With just one punch, he knocked out Xianxia, a formidable Supreme Peak expert. The revelation of his aura attracted many people rushing in. "Wushuang, what are you doing?" The first to rush in was Ji Chaoyang. As an ultimate emperor, he was considered the leader this time, and his strength was extremely powerful, already a perfect Supreme Peak expert, not inferior to the Divine General Mayin. Jian Wushuang walked forward slowly, his voice cold and stern. "Doing what I must do? What nonsense are you talking about? Miashang has suppressed his strength to Supreme Peak to devour you. Going alone means certain death. As long as you're alive, we still have a chance." Ji Chaoyang shouted in anger. Jian Wushuang raised his hand, exerting a slight force, and said, "I've long lost the power of life. You don't need to worry about me being devoured." For some unknown reason, when he arrived in the future timeline, he unexpectedly lost the power of life. Ji Chaoyang was also startled. Although he knew little about Miashang, he understood that the other party came for the life power inside Jian Wushuang. Now Jian Wushuang indeed had no life power. They had been guarding Jian Wushuang, knowing well that they could have killed him, but no one dared to make that move. Moreover, they had lost hope long ago. Miashang had nearly destroyed the entire river of time and space. They protected Jian Wushuang only to prevent Miashang from devouring him. During this time, thank you all. Please allow me a dignified farewell. Jian Wushuang slightly bowed to the approaching crowd. In reality, there was no need for them to protect him. They could have simply killed him, but that would have infuriated Miashang. However, they chose to guard him. Initially, the 1/3 of the origin source of all things was not wasted at all. At least, it led these people to choose to protect him. They guarded the original universe, guarding the current temporal river. Jian Wushuang. Without hesitation, Jian Wushuang rushed out of the flying hall and entered the river of time and space. He was heading back to the infinite valley. A great battle was still raging there. Boom! Jian Wushuang spared no effort, unleashing his full power, transforming into a stream of light flying towards the infinite valley. Since the Tao merge had failed, and the life power was gone, he felt like a discarded chess piece, with nothing worth reminiscing about. Better to die in battle. The future world is truly desolate. Everywhere Jian Wushuang passed, many temporal secrets turned into ashes. Just after flying for a quarter of an hour, he felt the power in his body gradually decreasing, and the backlash made him suffer immensely. Xianxia Buddha's words were right from the start. It was indeed a tremendous torment, watching his hometown perish and enduring the torment of the failed the Tao merge. He was a very strong-willed person, a person who would go to any lengths to become stronger. The difficulties he faced in refining his physical body back then were unimaginable, and he never retreated. Now, facing the failure of the Tao merge, how could he accept it? Infinite Valley. Dongshang, along with a few Tier 6 emperors, resisted hundreds of Tier 6 emperors and dozens of Supreme Peak experts, including ultimate emperors. Haha, they managed to escape. Today, my death wasn't in vain. Dongsheng laughed wildly, shaking his finger. At the tip of his finger burst forth the last glimmer of the origin source within him. Die! Dongsheng's face twisted with ferocity as he chose to exchange lives with the Supreme Peak warrior he engaged in combat with. The other Tier 6 emperors did the same. They embraced death generously. These once mighty warriors, now for the sake of their homeland and the temporal river, each chose to meet their demise. Jian Wushuang, millions of miles away, felt the fall of each blazing star, and a sense of desolation settled in his heart. The future's misery, to a large extent, was because of his power of life. Of course, Zhenling also played a part. The Qixin Temple brought them hope, only to personally destroy that hope. Originally, this temporal river should have led to prosperity. It was the aspiration of countless people from the beginning. The conflict between the two temples not only influenced the course of this temporal river but also destroyed it. How dare you! Jian Wushuang erupted again. A stream of light instantly descended onto the battlefield. His robe fluttered, but there was not a hint of color on Jian Wushuang's face. Once glorious, now in utter ruin. Jian Wushuang, a leading Supreme Peak warrior, walked out from the crowd, overjoyed to see Jian Wushuang returning once again. Capture Jian Wushuang alive and reward 1,000,000 universe crystals. Jian Wushuang raised an eyebrow and sneered. Is my life only worth 1,000,000 universe crystals? In an instant, memories surged in his mind. After his failed attempt at merging with the Tao, he never made a move again. Day after day, he languished in frustration, his entire being rendered useless. This was the first time he took action since his failure in the Tao merge. It seemed like many had forgotten the extent of his past strength. One thought. Jian Wushuang, hands forming a seal, his thought power now weak. Only with the aid of a secret technique could he unleash the power of the one-thought universe. Universe. Whoosh. This time it was a genuine universe. An elliptical universe, like a bubble, centered around Jian Wushuang, instantly covering the entire infinite valley. This is the one-thought universe. Be cautious, everyone, the leader warned, clearly familiar with Jian Wushuang. They were all formidable beings in the temporal river, having pledged allegiance to the Temple of World Annihilation. They knew Jian Wushuang well. The one-thought universe was also one of Jian Wushuang's most proficient pinnacle techniques. How could they not know? You all will die. Jian Wushuang endured the backlash from the origin source and instantly made a move. The one-thought universe, combined with his eternal ancient transformation, unleashed a power comparable to the Tribulation realm. At this moment, he might not be as formidable as the legendary Emperor Jueyun, but the difference wasn't significant. Even if a Tribulation realm powerhouse descended, he was confident to face him. However, no Tribulation realm powerhouses appeared from either temple. Although 2 of the 3 true monarchs personally took action, they did not intervene again after the fall of the Qixin temple. Whether they made a pact with Jinling or for some other reason, it remained unknown. As for Mieshang, as mentioned by Ji Chaoyang, he sacrificed his realm to devour Jian Wushuang and now stood at the supreme peak, unmatched in terms of combat strength. Slaughter! Hundreds of Tier 6 emperors, forming an array on the periphery, sought to restrain Jian Wushuang. All engaged in the battle were supreme peak experts, dozens of them besieging Jian Wushuang. In the eyes of these people, today Jian Wushuang was undoubtedly going to be captured alive. TSK, it seems you all really forgot. Jian Wushuang teleported in an instant, directly escaping the encirclement. His figure appeared on the outskirts, throwing a punch that instantly shattered the array formed by hundreds of Tier 6 emperors. All the Tier 6 emperors fell. It was just one punch. Before those supreme peak experts could react, Jian Wushuang, like a ghost, struck again. This time, his strength was even stronger. The future beast god armor was now complete, and its eruptive power was 1,000 times greater than before. Just the enhancement of the divine body alone made Jian Wushuang marvel. Unfortunately, after failing in the Tao merge, he became too disheartened and never upgraded his divine body. The current basic divine body was still 50,000-fold, like before the Tao merge. Combined with the amplification of the beast god armor, it had already reached 80,000-fold. So, he didn't need to draw his sword, he could instantly kill those supreme peak experts. In just a breath, blood-red raindrops began to fall from the sky. Emperors fall. Bathed in the blood-red rain, Jian Wushuang was extremely excited. Having completely merged with his future self, he felt relieved. After suppressing for such a long time, he finally had an outburst. Jian Wushuang! A roar came from afar. The next moment, Jian Wushuang saw the newcomers. A dense crowd, tens of thousands in number. The weakest were Tier 6 emperors. Among them were over 100 Supreme Peak experts alone. Jian Wushuang forgot to ask how much time had passed since he tried the Tao merge. Why were Tier 6 emperors so worthless, and why were Supreme Peak experts so undervalued? Not a single one from the Tribulation realm, which didn't make sense. Broly! In the heart of numerous grand halls, a robust figure sat on a towering throne. It was none other than Broly. At this moment, Broly had already reached the pinnacle of Supreme Peak, the undisputed top expert of the Temple of World Annihilation. As for his future, it remained uncertain, but in the timeline he currently occupied, Broly was the one who had slain the old man with goat horns. It seemed revenge would be sought in the future. The two exchanged a glance, no words exchanged. Instantly, they moved. The Supreme Peak expert of the Temple of World Annihilation. A transcendent master of the Transformation Tao. At the pinnacle of Supreme Peak. Jian Wushuang, however, remained calm. His thoughts mirrored his adversary's. Revenge was on the horizon. Clang. The Jueyun sword. Power of the starry sky. Long time no see. A faint smile appeared on Jian Wushuang's face. After the failure of the Tao merge, he feared that using this sword might lead to instant demise. But there was nothing to regret. After all, this was the future. If he died, so be it. If he truly perished, he would reappear at the Mahayana Spirit Mountain. He would expend all the power he had in this life and all the opportunities in the future to exchange for a successful Tao merge. Starry Sky Chronicles. The Jueyun sword erupted, a slash cutting directly towards Broly. Whether in the past or the future, Jian Wushuang had full confidence in this sword strike, because it had never let him down. Broly, the top expert of the Temple of World Annihilation. Perish! Jian Wushuang roared. The Jueyun sword completely cleaved Broly into two halves. Starting from the blade, the surrounding space instantly solidified, revealing a vast starry sky atlas. It was a scene of countless people. Broly, cleaved in two, and tens of thousands frozen in place. Oh right, there was Jian Wushuang too. The sword, released from his hand, was frozen within the Starry Sky Chronicles before it even reached the ground. This scene would be preserved indefinitely until the extinction of the starry sky. The cruelty of the future. the opportunities of the past. Everything was relative. Phew! Jian Wushuang once again saw the light, but this time he returned to the present. I knew it. Is this the karmic killing calamity? Jian Wushuang couldn't help but sigh, having experienced the brutality of the future world, the consequence of not cultivating diligently. Sometimes, it wasn't that he wanted to move forward. It was someone pushing him forward from behind. To fall behind even slightly was a tribulation. This karmic killing calamity was truly extraordinary. After a long pause, he was still not entirely recovered from the experience. The past, present, and future, the details of which need not be elaborated, for his existence spanned only a few epochs, not yet reaching the point of dimmed eyes and forgotten past. In the present, he was acutely aware, understanding the purpose he must pursue. However, the future was a different story. The uncontrollable future filled him with despair. The failure of the Tao merge, the destruction of the Qixin temple, and the impending annihilation of the entire temporal river. The dreadfulness of Miashang surpassed his imagination. I cannot fail. Jian Wushuang's expression was serious, the determination in his eyes as pure as his swordsmanship. His future self had fallen, but his present self would not allow his future to become a pitiful sight. He not only needed to succeed in the Tao merge but also to slay anyone standing in his way. Miashang, a half-step into the realm of the seven tribulation realm. Even Miashang will not stop him. Once he succeeded in the Tao merge, he would choose to leave the Qixin temple, departing from this space-time. At least the current Zhenling could be trusted. In the future, Zhenling would bring about the downfall of the Qixin temple, perhaps due to some unforeseen circumstances. Otherwise, with the nature of Zhenling, even if there was a certain connection between the Qixin and Miashang, Zhenling would not surrender without a fight. Because the birth of Zhenling and the inherited will were as unyielding as steel. In the eyes of Zhenling, Qixin was a god, forsaking his own Tao for the sake of the Moro spacetime, ultimately falling like a hero. Certainly not a villain. However, the truth revealed that the initial Qixin was probably, in fact, a villain willing to destroy the entire Moro timeline for the sake of surviving a little longer. Regardless of the circumstances, seizing the moment while Zhenling has not yet betrayed, Jian Wushuang needed to act quickly. Bathed in radiance, Jian Wushuang entered a vast void. This was a peculiar place within the temporal river. Moro temporal river? Jian Wushuang frowned slightly, his voice trembling, and his hands shaking. This time he saw the ancient Moro temporal river. It was a wide and majestic river. Within the river flowed countless powerful beings and numerous universes. As he carefully observed, a strange laughter interrupted Jian Wushuang. Hee hee? Jian Wushuang turned to look, and a twisted and changing evil spirit was staring at him. Countless ugly faces had two eyes each, staring fixedly at him. It's you! Jian Wushuang looked at the grotesque evil spirit in surprise. The evil spirit, with numerous lips torn apart, collectively emitted a hoarse voice. Do you know me? Heart Demon 1. Jian Wushuang's heart sank. Indeed, he had been schemed against. The 5 demon lords, Shan Jun, Blood Demon, 10,000 Demon, Heart Demon, and Wind Demon. He had encountered 2 of the first 3, and the remaining 2, he hadn't paid much attention to, only knowing that they were taken away by Mieshang. Unexpectedly, the Heart Demon was now within him. Are you Mieshang or Heart Demon? Jian Wushuang asked directly, without any ambiguity. The probability was high that the other party was manipulated by Mieshang, just like Broly. But what surprised Jian Wushuang was that this time, Heart Demon seemed to be stunned, as if it didn't recognize Mieshang at all. Splash! Heart Demon transformed from the evil spirit in Jian Wushuang's heart into a red-haired man, with an exceptionally beautiful face and flowing red hair. Mieshang? What's that? Jian Wushuang breathed a sigh of relief. Not knowing Mieshang was a good thing. Without Mieshang's manipulation, even if the opponent was one of the 5 demons, he was not afraid. He is an extraordinary existence. Too bad you don't know him. Since the other party had no connection to Mieshang, Jian Wushuang could ease up and engage in conversation. Why did this great demon lord choose to reside within him, and why did they completely merge with the karma calamity? When did they set their sights on him? The demonic voice, after hearing this, sneered arrogantly. You, a little brat, understand what's remarkable? Do you know who my true self is? The demonic voice seemed a bit arrogant, which didn't quite match his name. According to common sense, shouldn't the demonic voice be his own greatest fear? Why does the other party seem a bit foolish? Jian Wushuang deliberately showed a curious expression and asked, "Oh, I really don't know. Can you enlighten me on what is so remarkable?" "The remarkable existence is right in front of you." The demonic voice pinched his nose and continued, "Have you encountered Shan Jun or the blood demon? Do you know what sets me apart from those fools?" "I don't know." Jian Wushuang shook his head. He increasingly felt that this guy must be crazy. The demonic voice gloated. "Those fools only understand raw power, but they don't know that the most powerful force in this world is the power of the heart. The heart power of the 6th level is even stronger than the cosmic space." "Really?" Jian Wushuang exclaimed. "Since that's the case, why did you choose to reside in my body?" Upon hearing Jian Wushuang's confusion, a satisfied expression appeared on the demonic voice's face. "That's the heart power. You are my best host. I set my eyes on you when you entered the Qixin temple. Only you can nurture my strongest intellect. Speaking of which, I have to thank you." The demonic voice laughed maniacally. When Jian Wushuang entered the Qixin temple, he was targeted by the demonic voice. The karma calamity was actually quite ordinary, just a small tribulation for the universe and all things. But with the addition of the demonic voice, this tribulation became formidable. Moreover, the power of the current karma calamity had surpassed the scope of the emperor and resembled more of a tribulation at the supreme peak. "So that's how it is." Jian Wushuang nodded. No wonder the stronger he became, the stronger the karma-killing calamity within his body became. Turned out the demonic voice was behind it all. Now that he knew the answer, he felt quite relaxed because, for him, this tribulation was not a bad thing. Upon entering this spatial realm, his state of mind suddenly ascended. It was the power left behind by the heart demon. Drawing from this power, his heart power subtly began to loosen. The 6th level of the heart power, complete Tao heart. This was an opportunity that one could hardly come across, let alone seek. "What's your plan for me next?" Jian Wushuang asked tentatively. Although the strength of the heart demon was considerable, comparable to Shan Jun, it fell short when dealing with him in his current state. If a direct confrontation were to occur, the heart demon wouldn't stand a chance. "What should I do?" "Of course, I'll kill you." The complexion of the heart demon changed, and he gathered immense heart power in his hands, captivating the soul. Jian Wushuang's expression changed. With the means to counteract, he covered his chest with his palm, trembling as he said, "How could you possibly? How could you be so weak?" Jian Wushuang instantly restored to his peak, straightening his body. The methods of the heart demon were utterly incapable of threatening him. This time it was the heart demon who was shocked. He stared at Jian Wushuang in terror, unable to believe it. How is this possible? In his eyes, Jian Wushuang's heart power was only at the 5th level, far from achieving the complete Tao heart. How could he withstand the power of the heart demon? "What's impossible? Your power has no effect on me." Jian Wushuang's face twisted into a sinister smile. He continued, "Moreover, my Tao heart is now complete. Petty tricks are still just petty tricks in the end." In an instant, Jian Wushuang teleported, grabbing the heart demon by the neck. The force of devouring erupted instantly, engulfing the entirety of the heart demon's form into the palm of his hand. "Reveal your true face." Jian Wushuang was devouring the power of the heart demon, not its actual form. He didn't want this thing to enter his body again. The withered husk transformed in an instant into a frail old man. Wrinkles covered his face in a maze of lines. The old man stared at Jian Wushuang with terror, his voice trembling. "How do you possess the power of death?" "Power of death?" Jian Wushuang was taken aback. How did the other party know he had the power of death? The heart demon residing within him didn't mean they shared a connection, able to comprehend the universe together. The events happening outside, the heart demon shouldn't know anything about them. Otherwise, it wouldn't be ignorant of Mieshang. But now, the other party unexpectedly knew about the power of death. Why was that? Jian Wushuang didn't immediately strike. With a grasp of the void, he directly suppressed the heart demon in a transparent bottle. Holding the bottle with his fingers, he threatened, "How do you know about the power of death? If you dare to deceive again, I'll crush you." The current heart demon was like a crawling creature, controlled firmly by the power of all things that Jian Wushuang possessed. Your origin source contains the power of death. Your threats are futile. It won't be long before you perish. The heart demon laughed manically. No one can threaten me. I'm the one who threatens others. Jian Wushuang disdainfully listened to the grating laughter of his opponent, then directly swallowed the small bottle and gulped it down. Since the heart demon liked to bewitch people's hearts, let him stay within Jian Wushuang's body for a while. Originally, he intended to bring the heart demon into his own origin source space, but fearing the heart demon's methods, in case any unforeseen circumstances arose, it would be a loss he couldn't afford. Moreover, the identity of his opponent was not simple. Since Mieshang took away the other demon lords, it was likely that they had significant value. Jian Wushuang couldn't let the heart demon go. Let the heart demon stay within him forever. Now, he even distrusted Jinling inside his physical body. No one could save the heart demon. With his powerful physical strength, he wasn't afraid of any underhanded methods the heart demon might use. As for the power of death mentioned by his opponent, he would have to study it. The failure of the future Tao merge had always been thought to be his own problem. Now it seemed that someone was meddling in it. Otherwise, no matter how hard he tried, he might end up on the same path as before, to the point where he didn't even dare to attempt the merging of the Tao. The heart demon had already been dealt with, but there was no change in the surroundings. Jian Wushuang looked back at the temporal river. With no heart demon, only the karma calamity remains. Where are you hiding? Jian Wushuang looked down at the river of time, wanting to actively search. The reason the karma calamity had grown to this extent was largely due to the heart demon. Without the heart demon, the threat posed by the karma calamity should be minimal. How could he feel that something significant was about to happen, something that would pose a threat to him? What is it exactly? Jian Wushuang's eyes darted around, his entire body on high alert, not daring to be careless. Honestly, the threat of the heart demon to him was minimal. If it were an ordinary Tao Lord, they might have little resistance against the heart demon. But for him, the opponent was like a crawling insect, easily crushed. The only existence stronger than the heart demon, perhaps, was the tribulation that had been gestating. Jian Wushuang immediately retreated, and the ground where he had just stood began to collapse and crumble, reminiscent of when he had unleashed the one-thought universe. He had thought it was the tribulation attacking him, but it turned out that the flow of the temporal river was experiencing a disturbance. The temporal river was unexpectedly collapsing and shrinking, causing time to flow backward. The collapsing area grew larger, constantly engulfing its surroundings, soon reaching Jian Wushuang. No! Jian Wushuang tried to break free but found that no matter how hard he struggled, it was futile. His body was being dragged into the vortex of the collapsing temporal space. Falling into the temporal vortex, it was a chaotic space even more terrifying than a black hole. It contained both time and space, and even beings in the calamity realm would find it challenging to survive once they entered. After Jian Wushuang entered, he discovered a faint light protecting him. With this light, he traversed the vortex, and there were many shattered temporal fragments around him, each containing a specific point in time. The light enveloping his body gradually dimmed, but Jian Wushuang clenched his teeth and disregarded it. He directly flew towards the nearest temporal fragment and plunged into it headfirst. Boom! At first, there was darkness, followed by a deafening roar in the ears. The vision gradually expanded, and Jian Wushuang found himself in a wilderness, surrounded by grass over a foot tall. In the sky, thunder roared, and a fierce wind and rain followed. Splash! And barrier instantly enveloped his entire body. Jian Wushuang discovered that his strength was still there, and he sighed in relief. But he was somewhat puzzled. Where exactly was this place? This fragment of spacetime was likely from some period in the Moro spacetime. Without finding a way out, he would be trapped here forever. I need to find someone to inquire about the situation first. Jian Wushuang quickly made up his mind. He had read many books about the Moro spacetime in the Qixin Temple and roughly understood some important periods in the Moro spacetime, mainly divided into ancient desolation, higher heavens, human race, chaotic star domain, and Qixin era. It wasn't until the destruction of the Moro spacetime that the Qixin era came to an end. The first 4 eras combined were not as long as the Qixin era. The Qixin era marked the end of disorder, constructing its own Qixin era. There was a hint of excitement in Jian Wushuang's heart. Perhaps this time he had the chance to see Qixin. What would that meeting be like? Although he knew that the Qixin was likely a cunning figure who faked his own demise, he still wanted to meet this legendary figure. While he was standing still in a daze, a wild beast the size of several meters was gradually approaching Jian Wushuang. Its fangs stained with blood, raindrops clinging to its fur. Clearly, it was a bloodthirsty creature. Howl! It appeared and pounced from a few miles away. The strength of this wild beast was not weak. According to the power classification of the Moro spacetime, it was already a prenatal beast. But in Jian Wushuang's eyes, it was just an ordinary demonic beast. With a casual display of power, without deliberately controlling it, he directly blasted the nearby mountains and a vast forest into powder. The once lush land instantly turned into charred remains. Did I use too much force? Jian Wushuang shook his head. Then, with a leap, he instantly left the spot, opening his mind to search for traces of the human race. In the future, his spatial realm reached the cosmic level, and with his thought power, it encompassed the entire universe. The mesmerizing power of that magnitude captivated him. It was nearing the end of this lifetime. Once he attained the Tao merge, he could swiftly step into the cosmic spatial realm. At present, his mental force could cover the expanse of a high-level domain. Swoosh! Jian Wushuang abruptly halted, then changed direction, flying towards the south. Such a vast range, yet there are only a few hundred people. What era is this exactly? The entire scope of a high-level domain, occupied by merely 100 individuals, and they seem to be elderly cultivators practicing ancient qi cultivation techniques. The rest of the auras emanated from wild beasts. This continent, vast beyond comparison, was a land formed from a famous temporal secret realm in the Moro spacetime of ancient times, perhaps a land that gained prominence in comparison to the entire universe. Logically, a continent like this should have long been occupied by the human race. Could it be that the scriptures he read initially were inaccurate, or was the era he entered too ancient, with humanity yet to rise? The strength of those wild beasts was commendable, each displaying the prowess of transcendent beings, with even some reaching the level of Yen immortals. In the ancient Moro spacetime, the classification of strength was far from as detailed as it is today, and the realms were rough and varied. In simple terms, there were immortals and mortals which coincided with the 4 great secret realms. Earthly immortals, heavenly immortals, and emperors. Mortal realms consisted of postnatal, prenatal, myriad forms, nascent soul, and Mahayana. He had indeed spent tens of thousands of years crawling through and experiencing these realms back then. In the later stages of the Moro spacetime, some extraordinary geniuses, defying the heavens, could reach the Mahayana realm in just 100 years. With numerous treasures and powerful mentors, they indeed avoided many detours. For instance, when Jian Wushuang encountered a state of confusion in closed-door cultivation, others had powerful mentors to directly help them understand. Although his master was not weak, Xianxia mainly assisted him through teachings, with little guidance to dispel confusion. After all, they couldn't let him progress smoothly. Those geniuses who reached the Mahayana realm in 100 years couldn't reach his current state. It's not that those geniuses couldn't become Tao Lords, but most of them stopped at the Emperor realm. To become a tribulation realm cultivator, one needed to endure some hardships. Now Jian Wushuang's cultivation level was much stronger than an emperor. Within the Supreme Peak, there were few individuals who could match his strength. Arrived. Lost in thought, his figure had already approached the vicinity of human cultivators. Boom! Kill! As soon as he arrived, he heard the resounding shouts of battle in the sky. It turned out that these human cultivators had encountered a powerful wild beast, already at the later stages of the nascent soul realm. Among these cultivators, only one had reached the nascent soul realm, and it seemed like they were still in the early stages. The nascent soul realm was a significant cultivation level. Some nascent soul experts could effortlessly obliterate countless nascent soul entities with a wave of their hand. There was a considerable gap in strength. Just like the current situation, Jian Wushuang held the board on his thumb, and in a careless moment, the board fell off. Just as he was about to pick it up, the human cultivators couldn't hold on any longer. He couldn't bother with the board. He rushed over immediately to save lives. This time, he deliberately suppressed his aura, but even when he casually made a move, it still caused a significant commotion, shaking the heavens and the earth. The savage beast at the realm of nascent soul directly turned into debris, disappearing instantly on the spot. Jian Wushuang had already reached among the crowd, saving a baby from a cradle. If he had been a moment slower, the infant would have perished. Savior! The oldest among the group of human cultivators knelt directly in front of Jian Wushuang. Seeing the elder kneel, the others followed suit. Jian Wushuang held the infant in one hand and had his other hand behind his back, portraying the demeanor of an extraordinary outsider. He carried a mysterious divine sword on his back, adding to the enigma. However, he knew, based on the timeline, the ages of these people were probably even older than the Qixin temple. Please rise. I'm just in seclusion here, and I only intervened after being disturbed by this beast. No need to thank me. Jian Wushuang's voice was steady, carrying the air of a seasoned master. The leading elder, trembling, stood up and immediately introduced himself. Junior Kairu pays respects to the senior. I wonder if this place is the senior's Dao arena, and we've caused you much trouble. Jian Wushuang, however, paid no mind and instead looked down at the baby in his arms. He discovered that the child possessed innate potential, with ancient marks on the forehead, and inquired, I see some unusual marks on the baby's forehead. Is it the totem of your tribe? In this era, he had a clearer understanding. It was probably the end of the era of the higher heavens. Those born in the higher heavens era would have tribal totems. Yes, this baby in the senior's hands is my grandson, just born not long ago, the elder respectfully replied. Inwardly moved, their tribe had survived in this area for millions of years without producing a Mahayana cultivator. The seemingly young man before them was probably a Mahayana cultivator. If he took the grandson as his disciple, their tribe might finally have a Mahayana cultivator, qualifying them to leave this wilderness and enter the sacred grounds of the human realm. It would change the fate of their tribe. Just born, and the totem is already manifesting. Your grandson has excellent talent. Jian Wushuang nodded. Although he had limited knowledge of the Moro spacetime, he understood the basics. The totem on the infant's forehead manifested so early. In the future, it would likely become a nascent soul realm cultivator. There was hope for the Mahayana realm. Certainly, encountering him would make it easy to reach the Mahayana realm. With a single point, the power of all things entered the infant's brow. Following the power of all things, there was a thread of thought force entering the baby's body. After the thought force entered the infant's body, a massive bloodline power instantly numbed the hand of Jian Wushuang. Not simple, Jian Wushuang thought to himself. The future of this infant was extraordinary. He couldn't even probe into it. This power of all things could be considered a kind of good fortune. The old man looked on with envy. He could sense a powerful force injected into his grandson, and joy filled his heart. Just as he was about to follow Jian Wushuang's lead and continue speaking, Jian Wushuang interrupted. I have important matters to attend to, so I won't disturb you any longer, Jian Wushuang said and stood up to leave. The human race's sacred ground. Where did he want to go? Before leaving, Jian Wushuang remembered that the jade plaque had fallen. He wanted to go back and search for it. At this moment, a sudden inspiration struck him, and he thought of something. It was the jade plaque of Qixin. He brought it into the space-time, which meant there were now two identical jade plaques. If that was the case, the plaque in his hand would probably disappear. However, the plaque had not disappeared, and Qixin had not yet appeared. Forget it. Jian Wushuang shook his head, then turned to the old man Kairu and said, I have left a token nearby. If you are destined to find it, let the outstanding talents among the younger generation seek me out. Afterward, he left, leaving a seal on the jade tablet before departing. The fate of this jade tablet would eventually fall into the hands of the Qixin Temple. Even if he didn't give it to them, it would eventually end up in the possession of the Qixin Temple, as it was originally something belonging to them, and that couldn't be changed. After Jian Wushuang broke the seal and left, the group of human cultivators, except for the infant that Jian Wushuang had held, all went madly searching for the token. This was a great opportunity. This is interesting. Jian Wushuang continuously flew towards the human sacred land recorded in the script, finding it more and more intriguing. He had accidentally entered the Moro spacetime's higher heaven era. It seemed that Qixin was born in this era, and after 3 eras he established his own era. Maybe he could even encounter Qixin. From the records, the early days of Qixin were quite ordinary. During the glorious era of humanity, the Qixin was just an Earth immortal. In the chaotic star era, Qixin gradually became prominent. According to the records, in the higher heavens era, it was because a human cultivator became a boundary realm cultivator that it marked the end. Afterward, with the strength of one person, the Qixin led humanity to the peak of its era. In this era, humanity wasn't the only dominant force. Although it was called the human era, the strong of humanity at the time didn't see it that way. It was just a name given by later generations. Even though humanity had cultivators and perfected the methods of cultivation, the overall strength of humanity was far from matching the other races in the temporal river. Having one peak expert was simply not enough. At this moment in time, the formidable expert in the tribulation realm was likely about to appear. The only uncertainty lay in whether it would be within the human territory of this continent. His current position was approximately the distance of an entire universe away from the sacred land of the human race. In order to reach it faster, Jian Wushuang directly unleashed the eternal ancient transformation technique, elevating his strength to its peak. Now, the closer he got to the sacred land, the faster his strength increased. Whether this was a good or bad phenomenon, he had not heard of it before. As a result, his power had already overflowed, surpassing the pinnacle of conventional strength. In his normal state, he possessed top-notch peak combat power. After employing the eternal ancient transformation, his peak state now achieved perfect combat power, surpassing his expectations after initially merging with the Tao. Could it be that he would become an invincible emperor right after merging with the Tao? At this moment, he dared not claim to be an invincible emperor, only acknowledging that he had few rivals. The emergence of the power of the starry sky had indeed surpassed his understanding, but as long as there were no adverse effects, he could accept it. In merely 10 days, he traversed the span of an entire universe and arrived at the sacred land of the human race. Tunglong Continent, one of the sacred lands within the human territory. It was a sacred land on this continent, not the human territory along the entire temporal river, but the difference was not significant. Most of the life forms currently gestating in the universe were special life forms without any distinct groups. In the peak era of the human race, they embarked on a great migration, venturing into cosmic existence. Now, the humans reside within temporal secret realms. This explains why those special life forms always claimed the universe as their homeland, asserting it was not the territory of the human race. Upon entering the Tunglong continent, humans were ubiquitous, and the absence of wild beasts made this land exceptionally pleasing. Arriving here, Jian Wushuang felt no urgency to press forward. Since he hadn't found a way to leave, he decided to explore the mortal world and live here for a while. In a small country in the eastern region, far from Zhongzhou, Jian Wushuang assumed the guise of an ordinary person and began a mundane life. In the higher heavens era, the human race's cultivation methods were incomplete, and Jian Wushuang saw no need to borrow from them. He could only wait patiently. Although the time carried by this fragment of space was short, the spatial expanse was considerable. This ancient continent was much larger than the original universe. As time rushed by, Jian Wushuang wondered if he could endure until the emergence of Qixin. In the end, within a mere million years, he vanished from this place. When he reappeared, it was once again within the whirlpool of space-time. Only now, he was dressed in the attire of an ancient cultivator, and the jade tablet was nowhere to be seen. It seemed that everything was real. Over the course of a million years, he had traversed the Tenglong continent, leaving behind numerous opportunities in the sacred land of the human race. Although these opportunities were only useful for mortals, they could still change some aspects of the human race's history, accelerating their ascent to the pinnacle of tribes. Jian Wushuang frowned as he remained in the temporal vortex. Was he supposed to experience the Moro space-time before being allowed to leave? Swish! Jian Wushuang teleported once again, entering a massive fragment of time and space. Just like the previous time, after the darkness dissipated, he saw the current timeline. The village was desolate. Wild grass grew everywhere, and faint smoke rose from thatched houses. It was a mortal village. There was not a trace of vitality nearby. This time it was the era of the chaotic star domain. The human race had undergone a major migration, venturing into the cosmos. He was in a vast universe where, although most of it was still mundane, there were already quite a few cultivators. In this world, there were already emperors. This was merely a medium-sized domain. Jian Wushuang's sudden appearance startled the ox in the neighboring barn, causing it to bellow in distress. A cowherd child jumped and ran over. Seeing Jian Wushuang's attire, the child raised an eyebrow in surprise. For these ordinary people, they had never seen mortals dressed so neatly. Unfortunately, Jian Wushuang was not an ordinary mortal. He smiled at the child and was about to leave to meet the emperor. Back in the Tenglong continent, he had encountered several emperors, but they were too weak. He hadn't seen the powerhouse who led the human race to its peak, so he had no interaction with those individuals. He merely observed them from the shadows and left afterward. This time, he sensed more than one emperor. In the entire universal sect, there were at least hundreds of emperors, and their strength was formidable. In the era of the chaotic star, the Qixin temple had already risen, providing him with the perfect opportunity to inquire about Qixin's affairs. Just as he was preparing to leave, Jian Wushuang stopped in his tracks. He looked at the dark-skinned child, and the more he looked, the more familiar he seemed. He felt like he had seen this child somewhere. "Is your last name Bai?" Jian Wushuang asked cautiously. The child, not afraid at all, replied playfully, "Why should I tell you?" Swish! Jian Wushuang simply flipped his palm, and a string of candied haws appeared. He asked again, "What's your name?" "Bai Gooden." The child, unbothered by dirty hands, grabbed the candied haws directly instead of using a sign like Jian Wushuang. Ha ha ha! Jian Wushuang chuckled heartily as he ruffled the child's head. This child must be an ancestor of Bai Junwang or perhaps even Bai Junwang's father. The resemblance to Bai Junwang's face was uncanny. Upon hearing the laughter inside the house, thinking someone had come to visit, people walked out only to find the child standing alone outside the cattle shed, holding a lump of cow dung and licking it. "Gooden, have you gone mad?" The woman who came out, grabbing Gooden's ear, walked towards the house, scolding, "You idiot! Haven't you eaten enough? Eating cow dung. When your second uncle comes later, he might think I can't support you." After scolding, the woman was still somewhat dissatisfied. She kicked Gooden's buttocks a couple of times, saying, "When your second uncle comes this time, be prepared to go to the city and become a disciple of Kixwoman. Show some promise. Do you hear me?" Jian Wushuang, soaring into the clouds, couldn't help but maintain a smile. This feeling was too strange. Now he understood why his teacher Xianxia said he was waiting for him in the future. Xianxia probably used similar means to enter their timeline. This also indicated that their timeline would also shatter in the future. Or perhaps Xianxia had other methods to enter a specific time period, selecting disciples from a certain point in the past. He, however, was a bit different. He wanted to delve into the future from the timelines of the past, to see what Qixin was really planning. Revival was not that simple. It was incredibly complex. What kind of power was needed exactly? He needed to be prepared. His aura leaked out. This time he didn't need to actively search. As long as he emanated an emperor's aura, it would attract powerful emperor-level beings to come personally. On a green cliff peak, Jian Wushuang stopped in his tracks. In the pale blue sky, a sudden aurora appeared, and in an instant, a dignified man with a high crown materialized. "May I inquire about your esteemed name and why you appear in my Dao arena?" The man, exuding an air of arrogance, looked down from a high vantage point. Jian Wushuang slowly raised his hand, a mere grasp in the empty space, and effortlessly seized the arrogantly postured man. "I ask a question, you answer. Dare to conceal, and I will make your death unbearable." The threatening tone resonated as Jian Wushuang exerted his dominance. The formidable emperor was so frightened that he didn't dare to breathe loudly, because Jian Wushuang suppressed every bit of his aura. This arrogant man was merely a Tier 3 emperor, and his origin source Dao was still weak, seemingly only a 4th-grade origin source Dao. Such a character was not even worth mentioning in the Qixin Temple's 4 great secret realms, let alone in the current original universe, where there were plenty of beings of much higher stature. "Senior, spare my life, and I'll speak." The arrogant man immediately begged for mercy. The gap between the two was too vast. Even his master, in all likelihood, did not possess such overwhelming oppressive force. "What's your name, and who is your master?" "Junior's name is Wu Tong. My master is Taoist Juhua, a good friend of the desolate emperor." Jian Wushuang grinned sinisterly. "Are you trying to threaten me?" As he spoke, he exerted more force, causing Wu Tong's face to turn red and purple. "Junior dare not. I'm just speaking the truth. Considering your resemblance to someone I knew, I'll spare your life." Jian Wushuang threw Wu Tong aside. Wu Tong Wuzhua. He was genuinely afraid that the other person had some connection with Wuzhua. After all, he was an emperor, and with an extraordinary background, their descendants were likely to shine brightly in the era of Qixin. He was particularly intrigued by the desolate emperor mentioned by the other party. Qixin Temple, the desolate divine master among the 3 divine masters. This divine master had once saved the great desolate wilderness. He remembered it vividly. Now, still just an emperor, he could go and inquire about the matters of the Moro spacetime and incidentally learn more about the Qixin. The desolate aura was intense. He could clearly feel it. This time, he concealed his own aura and began moving towards the direction of the desolation. Concealing his aura, no one in this universe could detect him. In this era, few could discover him. In the current era, there were probably only a handful of human realms transcendent experts, and their strengths were relatively weak. In just an hour's time, he arrived in the domain where desolation was located. It wasn't that close in distance, but flying in the original universe was much faster than in the temporal river, without any resistance. Because the space in the original universe was purer, without the heaviness of the temporal river, and time was condensed within the space. It was extremely difficult to destroy, and even flying became unbelievably slow. Up close, Jian Wushuang could immediately discern the strength of the Desolation Emperor, Huang, a complete stage expert at the supreme peak level. According to the records in the books, during the late Chaotic Star era, Huang reached the Tribulation Realm, and then followed Qixin into a new era. In the early days of Qixin, the gap between the 3 divine masters and Qixin wasn't significant, but as time passed, the disparity became more apparent. When Qixin reached the 7 Tribulation Realm, the 3 divine masters were only at the 5 Tribulation Realm. Only one person had the smallest gap with Qixin, and that was Mieshang. Jian Wushuang really wanted to find that old guy and take the opportunity to settle the score and let off some steam. Moreover, He wanted to remind the other person to definitely help someone named Jian Wushuang in the future. Unfortunately, he couldn't find Miashang at all. Perhaps the guy had changed his name. In case he found Miashang and realized he was at the Tribulation Realm and couldn't defeat him, that would be troublesome too. Well, it's better to go find Huang and have a chat first. Just as he arrived, Jian Wushuang felt a violent force in conflict. Jian Wushuang looked in the direction and saw on a massive arena. Huang was battling a savage beast. The strength of that savage beast was formidable, even stronger than the 8-armed beast emperor who fought Broly. Despite possessing the power of Supreme Peak, it was unfortunate to encounter Huang, constantly being trampled upon. Jian Wushuang became interested and decided to fly over directly. Huang, fully engrossed in the battle, didn't notice Jian Wushuang's arrival. However, some emperors watching around noticed him. "You! Who are you?" Several emperors around instantly intercepted Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang put his index finger to his lips, indicating these people not to disturb Huang, who was still in battle. Under his threat, these people surprisingly obediently chose to keep quiet, standing in place and watching Jian Wushuang. At the same time, numerous clearly visible short swords floated around his neck. If they dared to make a sound, Jian Wushuang didn't mind killing a few emperors in advance for some excitement. In the arena, Huang, like an ancient wild man, barefoot with disheveled hair, wielded a stone axe. Every strike would inevitably injure the savage beast. "The 17th strike," Huang angrily shouted. With another swing, the savage beast howled, completely silent thereafter. A savage beast comparable to the complete stage Supreme Peak fell, appearing so insignificant under Huang's simple and unadorned stone axe. Huang walked to the corpse of the desolate beast, pulled the giant axe embedded in its body with one hand, wiped it off, and then hung the axe at his waist. At that moment, he noticed someone watching him, and it was a powerful stranger he didn't recognize, like a black hole. "Who is it?" Huang turned to Jian Wushuang, his eyes moving. The person in front of him concealed his aura very cleverly. It wasn't until he was in front of him that Huang noticed. Upon closer inspection, he found that the restrained aura was like a black hole, swallowing all the power within. "Huang!" Jian Wushuang saw the other person very surprised. The appearance and the axe in his hand were unexpectedly familiar. That axe, he knew it too well. Scenes from the starry sky emerged in his mind, thinking of the wild giant man born on the barbaric planet. He also thought of the owner of the stone axe when they parted. "Dong Jun," Jian Wushuang muttered to himself. The starry sky humanoid, supposed to be a dream, appeared in the Moro spacetime. The stone axe in the hands of Emperor Huang, he was more than familiar with it. Absolutely no mistake, it was the one from Dong Jun's hands. How could it appear here? When Huang heard Jian Wushuang silently mention Dong Jun, his expression froze, surprised. "You know Senior Dong Jun?" "I do. He's an old acquaintance." Jian Wushuang nodded and then asked, "How do you know Dong Jun? And how did you get this giant axe?" The emperors who were frozen in place, seeing Jian Wushuang and Emperor Huang actually knew each other, all breathed a sigh of relief. In their view, Jian Wushuang's strength was extremely powerful. If he were to make a move against them, it would probably take their lives in an instant. Huang held the giant axe in his hand, looked up at the sky, and then looked at Jian Wushuang, saying, "Are you a person from the higher heavens?" "Higher heavens." Since the higher heavens shattered, the era of the higher heavens had also come to an end. The stone axe in Huang's hand came from the higher heavens. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was a gift from the higher heavens. The shattering of the higher heavens was a calamity for the world, but for cultivators it was also an opportunity. Because within the higher heavens, countless treasures and innumerable legacies are hidden. These legacies and treasures are scattered throughout the temporal river, forming starry secrets. That's what is now known as the chaotic star domain. The stone axe in Huang's hand was obtained from the chaotic star domain. In addition to the stone axe, he also acquired a severed arm. The arm tightly gripped the stone axe. Understanding why Huang obtained the stone axe, Jian Wushuang had even greater doubts in his heart, to the extent that he didn't even bother to inquire about the matters of the Qishan temple. This stone axe comes from the higher heavens, probably a treasure trove left from the previous era, or a hidden treasure that descended from the starry sky. If it's really as he deduced, then Dongjun and the once existing star are much older than the ancient Moro spacetime. Looking at the runes on the stone axe, they are definitely cosmic-level runes. This also indicates that the star he once visited, which gave birth to such powerful life as the Universe Master, has now perished. Jian Wushuang didn't expect that, unconsciously, he had traveled to an even more ancient era. However, at that time, his understanding of time and space was limited. Moreover, when he left that star, there wasn't even a Yen immortal above him. He never thought that the star could proliferate to such an extent. "Can I take a look?" Jian Wushuang asked. Huang was generous and directly handed over the stone axe. Taking the stone axe, Jian Wushuang's thought force penetrated it, and the power of the starry sky instantly burst out from his hand. After enduring the power of the starry sky, the might of the stone axe became billions of times stronger than before. The force shattered the array that sealed the arena. Huang was astonished that Jian Wushuang could fully unleash the power of the stone axe, and his body was repeatedly pushed back by the shock. "Senior." Huang knelt directly. Jian Wushuang's temples fluttered, and the stone axe emitted a buzzing sound, as if rejoicing at returning to its original owner. In reality, he was not the original owner. The first-generation owner of this stone axe was the one who opened up the heavens and earth. He couldn't be considered the second-generation owner either. He simply repaired it and gave it to Dongjun unexpectedly. This little guy could nurture this stone axe into such a powerful treasure. Dongjun's strength was at least that of a powerhouse beyond the three tribulation realm. Only those who mastered the universe, becoming the universe master, could nurture a universe treasure. Ordinary tribulation realm cultivators couldn't achieve this. If Dongjun was so powerful, then what about his cheap disciple? Fu Zhu, the first-generation patriarch of the human clan. Dongjun could become the universe master, and Fu Zhu's strength probably wouldn't be too weak. But he should have fallen by now. For a moment, Jian Wushuang's confidence surged. It was possible that his disciple might be the universe master, and even his descendants might be universe masters. "Besides this stone axe, what else have you obtained?" Jian Wushuang asked curiously. He was increasingly eager to know what was nurtured within the higher heavens. Huang carefully took the stone axe and answered respectfully. "In the beginning, I was merely fortunate to enter a rift in the fabric of time. Subsequently, I found myself on a partially shattered planet, where there was only a severed arm and a stone axe." After speaking, Huang directly took out the severed arm, and the power emanating from it was extremely formidable. Jian Wushuang gazed deeply at this severed arm, becoming more and more familiar with it. This severed arm was just a simple physical body without an embedded divine body. However, the density of the flesh was very similar to his own. It was undoubtedly a 9-refinement physical body. Jian Wushuang reached out his hand and gently caressed it. As he touched it, his brows furrowed. From the arm, he sensed a familiar power. It was the power of the fusion between physical body and divine body, along with the familiar aura of the origin source. This was damn well his own arm. Jian Wushuang directly took several steps back, then stared at the patterns on his palm, and examined the lines on his hand. The patterns above were exactly the same as the ones on his palm. How could this be explained? An arm, for him, was nothing. But the arm was obviously chopped off by the stone axe, which explained a lot. In the past, it seemed like he had a major battle with Dongjun, resulting in the severed arm. The stone axe was left behind. However, such speculation wasn't entirely accurate. After leaving the starry sky, he never returned. That didn't make sense. Could it be that his future self would go to the starry sky again, engage in a battle with Dongjun, and have his arm chopped off by the opponent? Either that or this arm wasn't his. However, the aura of the origin source would not deceive him. The aura of the origin source was too similar to his own. The power of life. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang suddenly understood. It was highly likely that his conflict with Dong Jun wasn't a duel with him but with Mieshang.